Hi there, folks. So we are once again behind the scenes, checking if things are working. Lee is not able to hear me right now, so I am testing via my phone to see if I am able to hear myself coming through on the YouTube feed. So let us see what happens. Lee's still not hearing me, I guess.
I'm
Nope.
getting nothing.
That
I
almost
see
sounded
your
like he was
green
responding
lights
to me, but
bouncing on
yep,
first reflect in the bottom right-hand corner.
that's
I
going
see my
along.
green lights bouncing, but I do not hear you.
I am coming through on YouTube.
Let's see. I will mute you and unmute you. Great. Now, how do I unmute you? Ah, okay. So, okay, you're coming through on
I'm
YouTube,
unmuted on my side. Here we go.
but
I'm
not here.
coming
So what in the
coming
hell
through
could I be
loud and
doing?
clear on YouTube. Ah, dear. All right. I am not sure why Lee is not able to hear me. Um,
Check settings here.
I don't know. Lee might have to
Ah,
restart his
got you.
computer.
Got you. Got
Oh,
you.
he's hearing
I,
something.
yeah, I went to settings in Google Hangouts.
Yup.
And under settings, there was I could use default,
Yes.
or I switched it to more specifically the speakers on my sound card. I don't know
Uh-huh.
why I had to do that, but there's your voice.
Okay, well that's good enough.
Okay. Good Lord. Save. Save. Yes. For God's sake, save. Now, if only if I could figure out why my camera looks so poopy crappy.
Well, I don't think we'll even worry about that.
Yeah,
We're
I
doing
know.
all right.
You can
Yeah.
imagine I'm slightly worried about it, but okay.
Well, if you can open your recording program, this is lovely
I
behind the
will.
scenes stuff for all the YouTube viewers.
Hi, YouTube viewers that wonders
That's
how this
right.
happens. It barely happens. Okay.
Is your
All right.
recording program open?
I'm about to. I closed it a minute
Okay.
ago in case
That's
that was
true.
part of the problem. And it
Understood.
was not. And let me check levels in that. Check, check, check. Okay. File new. Mono 16-bit 44.1.
That's
All
all
right.
good.
And all right. That is ready to
Alrighty,
record.
I'll give you a 1, 2, 3 record, and on the word record, press record.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, record.
All right.
And you can give me a 1, 2, 3 pop.
1, 2, 3.
Pop. Alrighty, we're all synchronized as far as putting this together later. What I'm going to do here, folks, I'll throw up our AV Rant logo. That'll be up there for a little bit with some silence, and then we'll start into the podcast. Let me just make sure I've got something to read as far as what we're talking about tonight.
Oh, I never used my lower third graphic that Austin made me. I don't know. Is it too late to do that?
You could give it a try if you go over to the Hangouts toolbox over on the left there.
Right.
You open that up, and then you go to the icon that is in the upper left-hand corner, the circle with a
Uh-huh.
head,
Yeah.
and you can go lower third there and choose. Oh no, that's just a logo. Oh yeah,
It
you
says
can
lower
enter.
third, Lee
Yeah, no, no,
Overstreet,
no, that's
choose
not gonna
logo.
work. Custom
Nope.
upload. I guess that's what you'd have to do.
Custom upload. All
I
right, wait
have
a
no
minute.
idea.
I,
Give it a
I,
try.
you'd be surprised what we can do here. Let's go for it. I mean, and then
We're
hit
so tech
save.
savvy. I would imagine, and then there's a
Oh, and turn
little
it on. Let me turn it
on
on.
and off radio button.
It's backwards.
Ooh. Oh no, it'll look backwards on your screen. It looks fine on mine.
Okay. Well, there's my baseball bat.
Hey, look at that.
All right.
That's pretty cool.
How about that? We got. All right. Cool. Let's just
All
do
right.
it. Why not?
I got some
Austin went through the
topics.
trouble to make it.
No kidding. Okay, so I got some topics. We're recording. All of that looks good. All right, here comes the logo and some silence. Woo, ready for that? Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H. I'm acting as your host this week while Tom Andry is away, and I am here with...
Lee Overstreet, occasional AV Rant pinch hitter and color commentator, as viewers of YouTube will see on my baseball bat logo.
That is so nice. We went to so much difficulty to bring you this podcast today. Why not have a lower third for Lee?
We're barely here. Actually, I thank Austin for making it. This baseball bat, it looks a little big and violent. It looks more like Captain Caveman's Club. but I like it for that reason.
It has a microphone on the end. People will get the idea. That's if you come and watch the YouTube feed. But this is
right.
AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And yeah, we're going to start off by thanking our listeners of the week. We have several this week, which is very nice. We're going to thank Karpov, Sam, and Nathan D, all of whom came to avrant.com, went over to the right-hand side where it says support the podcast, and gave us a PayPal donation to help pay for all of our bandwidth and hosting and fees and stuff like that. So thank you, gentlemen, all very much. Very nice.
So much.
Nathan also wanted to say that he's really enjoying the new split screen format, which is not happening today, because if I did that, it really wouldn't work. I have to like keep the video on Tom, and then he's the one who's normally streaming it, but everything's different today. So
yeah, plus I don't want people to see that I have like 2 beers. That would be embarrassing. I'd hate to show them that there are 2 beers on my desk. That's not right. You shouldn't do that for a podcast.
Some of those look like they've been a little bit partially drank already.
They might have been. Don't you worry about that. I had some help. That wasn't all me.
And Nathan also appreciates the increased use of visuals. There won't be a whole lot today. We didn't have a ton of pictures to put up, but we'll do what we can. I also wanted to give a personal thanks to Paul McDonald. He is our race car driver up here in the lower mainland of British Columbia, Canada. Well, he came through big time. I was selling my Pioneer Kuro television. I had a 60-inch KRP 600M monitor, so I was selling that, but I'm selling it to a person in the States. It has to get shipped down there. I was like, how do I package and ship this thing in a way that's actually going to get there safely, because I don't have the original carton anymore. So he pointed me towards a packaging depot in our local area who takes care of all. They came and picked it up, packaged it up, sending it across. I'm going to reserve judgment on the whole thing because they've been a little bit slow and not fantastic on the communication side, but all in all, the service is worth it. So
how much does that weigh?
It's over 130 pounds with the stand. Yeah, because it's a plasma, it's real glass, so.
Yeah. My plasma was about 100 pounds. So.
Yep. Yeah, they're heavy beasts, so it was. It needs to be packed well, but yes, that's all good. So yeah, this is AV Rant. We answer your home theater questions when you send them to us, and all you have to do is email question@avrant.com. That will go to our producer, who wrangles up all the questions, puts them in our topic list. It's also super helpful if you can CC rob@avrant.com and tom@avrant.com, so that we all get your messages all at the same time. You can also contact us, of course, on our website, that is avrant.com. And you can come to Facebook. We're there. It's facebook.com/AVRantPodcast, all one word. And we're also all on Twitter. I am @FirstReflect. Tom is @AVRant_Tom. Lee, how can people get in touch with you? They can see it if they're watching YouTube.
If you're watching YouTube, you see it on my Captain Caveman bat. It says @LeeOverTweet. As opposed to Overstreet, @LeeOverTweet. You can always ask me questions too, but if you want correct answers, you need to send it to Rob or Tom or Austin.
And yes, speaking of Austin, @Austin Pond. Austin spells his name with a T-E-N, not a T-I-N. And Austin has his own podcast. It is called We Watch Movies. And with such a title, how would people know what it's about? Lee, you've heard
it's about logging, the logging industry, and specifically logging industry in the 19th century. So fantastic photos that they share online of those thousands and thousands of logs going down the river and stuff like that. I've been into that, and the different kinds of bark was like last week, and how they strip the bark off and the equipment they used back then. It's fascinating.
We watch movies. Of course, that's what it would be about. Yeah. All right. So we're going to start off with some news before we get to all the questions. Lee, why don't you hit us up? What's happening in the headlines?
All right. So Toby H. sent us this. There is a man spending $1.5 million constructing a home theater that looks like the Star Trek The Next Generation bridge. Holy cow. I did have a little time to go take a look at that. And wow, am I jealous? I don't know.
I'm showing a quick pic. This was just from the article that was written about it.
Right.
Showing that there on YouTube. So yeah, he's got the Star Trek The Next Generation. So that would be what the Enterprise D, right?
Yes. He themed the entire, is this done in his basement, I guess?
I don't know. The guy had, he's
part of his house.
Yeah, he's a financier. He says all of his memorabilia adds up to about $1 million, and then this theater was more than $1.5 million. Right. Everything in here is custom made.
He owns a company that makes things for NASA.
Something like that. I don't know.
So this is like what happens when nerds get rich. really rich.
I
He
think I'm
redid
most
his
excited.
whole. It's amazing. It really is accurate though. Like of course, it
Pretty
doesn't look
cool.
exactly like the bridge precisely,
Right, it's
but
not
the
like the
style
captain's
matches
chair.
perfectly.
Yeah, the chairs look a little different. Of course, they're home theater recliners. But no, I'm mostly excited because they said that when you come through the doors at the back, which, in the show, the doors were off to the right, so it's not like an
Right.
exact replica. They're in the back there, but when they're automated and you walk through them, and when they open, they make the swoosh sound.
Oh, I mean, it is cool, but at the same time, I'm going, really, dude? But okay. I see he hasn't upgraded to Atmos yet, but he
It
does
didn't
have
seem
the
so.
he
That's
does
right.
have the D-Box butt vibrators.
Yeah, that's right.
Shakes the whole house, I guess.
Anyway, good on him. I don't have that kind of money, but it's pretty cool.
I mean, I would if I won the lottery, probably. If I'm being honest, I'd do something crazy like that. Another news item: Samsung's $1,500 HWK950 5.1.4 and their $1,000 HWK 850 3.1.2 wireless Atmos soundbars are now available to order. DTS-X is not supported, but these are Atmos soundbars, which
They are.
Immediately I get a facial tick because soundbar barely can do surround sound in my opinion. Now it's better than nothing.
They've got the 3 speakers built into the bar that sits up at the front, and then they have an additional 2 speakers firing upward from that bar. So that would right there, that's the HWK 850 with the 3.1. There's a wireless subwoofer, so that's a .1. So the 3.1.2 all built in one bar with a wireless subwoofer. Now the HWK 950, which somehow the $500 extra in the price tag, all it gets you is 2 wireless speakers. Now the 2 wireless
more speakers in the back,
do have upward firing drivers as well.
They do. Yeah.
So the whole thing is wireless. That's the selling feature of it. So you got the bar up front and then 2 wireless speakers, and then the 2 wireless speakers and the bar, they all have upward firing drivers, get to 5.1.4. Right. I mean, having DTS-X not support, I mean, I'm not super bullish on DTS-X at all at this point, but there are some movies that have DTS-X and not Dolby Atmos. It would be kind of nice to be able to support that. There's no talk of it getting a firmware update to support it. So right now, the only sound bar that you can buy that does support it is Yamaha's digital sound projector, their YSP 5600. That's also $1,500. So that one, there's no wireless speakers. There is a wireless subwoofer with the Yamaha, but that one uses their digital sound projector technology to steer beams of sound that reflect off your walls and off your ceiling. So that one is a 7.2.2 simulation.
Wow, so that's a lot more sophisticated than what Samsung is doing.
Yeah.
Now, one concern I have, if you're trying to bounce from a sound bar off the ceiling, your TV better not be mounted too far out from the wall. It better be quite flat.
Oh no, the soundbar better be in front of the TV. That's
out in front, so it gets up to the ceiling, and your ceiling
you
better not.
This, if you're mounting the soundbar above the TV, you wouldn't want to have it too high because you're supposed to have at least 4 feet from the upward firing driver to the ceiling.
Right,
so
and you also better not have big vaulted ceilings with wood beams and such.
Needs to be some flat ceilings in there.
But I guess okay if you fit all those requirements.
With that price, I don't know. But then again, to get to 5.1.4. Right now, you're looking at a minimum a $900 AV receiver to do that. So that'd be some pretty cheap speakers to do it that way. So
$600 worth of speakers is not. Yeah, it just depends. I don't know. Just hold off, folks, until you can do all the speakers. I just don't understand if you can only have a sound bar. If for some reason you're just limited, you're renting temporarily, something like that, or the structure is such. I just say go with stereo sound. That's just me, though. I don't know. Just the bouncing around is kind of neat if you're in the right place and your room is made of the right stuff.
They're out there. You can order them if you want to.
I don't mean to be so grumpy about it, but something bothers me about just beaming sound everywhere. All right, so another item. Movie Pass has a new CEO, Mitch Lowe, and new pricing plans. They've divided up the country into 3 tiers of markets based on average movie ticket prices for any given area. And each tier gets 2 movies, 3 movies, and unlimited movie packages per month subscription options.
Yeah, so you pay it up front. You pay the money up front, and then using your movie pass, you can go to your local theater and
that's right.
if they are a partner and actually let you use movie pass.
Right. So for instance, if you happen to be in what they designate as the lowest tier, it's $15 a month and you get to see 2 movies. And you go as high as $50 a month, And is that unlimited movies?
That's unlimited in the tier 3 markets.
In tier 3.
Yeah.
Now, I'm in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm tier 1 for sure. We've got one theater.
Probably. So you could do unlimited for $40 where you are.
Yes, if I wanted to see that many movies, but...
Yeah, and when they say unlimited, there's a caveat, big caveat, which is that you cannot watch the same movie more than once.
Right.
So no repeat viewings on your... I mean, of course, you can go and pay your own money, but you can't do it on the Movie Pass. Now, previously, they used to say, if you... Let's say you went and watched a movie at 8 p.m. on Tuesday. You wouldn't be able to use Movie Pass again until 8 p.m. on Wednesday if you did that. That was the previous one. Now they're saying...
mean, yeah.
Now they're saying they don't have that time limit. You know, you see one movie at 10 p.m. on Tuesday, you can go at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. That's fine. You don't have to have this 24-hour thing anymore. But you can't see the same movie. But you could go and see every movie that's at your theater.
Yeah. Now, in my hometown, I think we might have 8 movies at any given time. It's just not that exciting. So... We have one theater. There's one theater with 16 screens, and that's
This might be less expensive for you. I mean, you know, in the tier 3 market, so that's, you know, the most expensive places. That'd be New York City, Los Angeles. So it's, you know, the cheapest one is $21 for 2 movies. So if you go to the movie theater and it costs you more than $21, you know, to see 2 movies, then it's kind of worth it. If you do
bottom line, if you're a movie buff and you love going to see movies, getting out of the house, going to the theater, that's worth thinking about.
Sure.
Next one, Disney Studios is rumored to finally be getting into Ultra HD Blu-ray with Finding Dory, expected to be amongst their first titles set to debut before the end of 2016. So, and that kind of makes sense. Finding Dory is all digital anyway. It was all done on a computer. Shouldn't be too hard to print that out to a 4K
and Disney
Blu-ray.
is already showing in Dolby Cinemas at the actual movie theaters in high dynamic range with Dolby Atmos sound. So I'm crossing my fingers that when they bring their movies to Ultra HD Blu-ray, they will support high dynamic range and Dolby Atmos sound. It would seem weird if they didn't, but then again, they're Disney. They've waited this long to even say they'll support the format whatsoever. So
it does seem like if you're making the jump to 4K, go ahead and make the jump to Atmos, to HDR, do the whole thing. Yes. You would hope and think. And the colors would be amazing from those computer animations.
Oh, yeah. And it'll be nice to hopefully get some Marvel movies and some Star Wars movies because all of that is part of Disney. So, yes, please come to Ultra
That's coming. Well, you know what they'll do with the Star Wars? They'll release a 4K that's not HDR. Then they'll come out with the HDR one. Then there'll be the HDR Collector's Edition with extra clips. And then the Atmos one.
Why not? I don't know what they're going to do with Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith that were photographed in 1080p on digital cameras. You have to up-res them. The original capture was 1080p, so there's not much you can do about 4K.
They didn't use like what is those red cameras that do 4K? They didn't do that?
Nope. They were the Sony cameras that were 1080p.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Let's say 2K, because they were 2K, genuine 2K resolution, but yeah.
Well, they jumped on that early, didn't they? All right, another news item, this one via Infinite Gary. Asus is including DTS Headphone X processing in its ZenFone and ZenPad products. They're available in Taiwan right now and expected to roll out worldwide over the summer. And you know what? I didn't realize they made phones. Asus?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah, they make phones and tablets. And I don't know. I mean, this was a DTS X press release, or DTS Headphone X, I should correct myself. Right. I don't know. DTS Headphone X hasn't taken off exactly the way that everyone hoped. I mean, at least it's going to be in some products. So if you are an Android user and you want to get one of these Asus ZenPhones or ZenPads, then it'll have DTS Headphone X processing built right into the thing.
Don't know if that's a big selling point for me. We just bought new phones, by the way. I'll show off my baby to the camera. I got a little Samsung S7. It's so pretty. It's lovely. That's right. Although, in HD-related tangent here, on the latest version of the Android Facebook app, you cannot upload HD videos.
Oh, all right.
Believe that?
But if you have standard def or something?
It converts it to standard def to upload via the Facebook app. If you have the iPhone version, you can do high def. And so I want to murder people because my old phone, the old version of Facebook, you could upload high def videos. And it just, why does everything get worse? Why, Rob?
I don't know. I don't know. Apps are weird.
Did Apple pay Facebook for that?
I don't think so.
Because why would it just be Apple? Anyway. But we're moving on past the news into comments. So these are things we are not obligated to say anything back to them. It's just comments. So Andy, who runs the noaudiophile.com website, heard us talking about outdoor speakers and in-wall, in-ceiling speakers, he wanted to recommend checking out Outdoor Speaker Depot. There's a depot for everything. They have a pretty good selection of inexpensive outdoor installation and whole house audio equipment and accessories that they sell under their own OSD brand.
Yeah,
that's kind of
so
cool.
I took a look at them. They look very similar to, at least on their fascia, like the outward appearance, from products that you can get from htd.com. That's hometheaterdirect.com. So, I mean, obviously they're hiring an OEM and an original electronics manufacturer to make these products for them. Now, I did look at the driver configuration. So even though the in-wall speakers, the outward appearance is the same, they are using different drivers. So, they're not identical speakers to what HTD sells, but they're in a similar price bracket. They've got a similar look, and they're obviously having someone else make it for them. I got zero problems with that. The prices are definitely nice, so worth checking out. If you
would think an outdoor speaker depot would specialize and do an extra good job with outdoor speakers. You would hope.
They wouldn't last long if they didn't. So,
that's right.
I'll certainly say worth checking out.
You have one job, Outdoor Speaker Depot. All right. Adrian A. on Facebook thanked us for discussing his turntable options. He decided to go with the less expensive Audio Technica AT-LP60, and he's happy with the results. He's been able to find records for 50 cents, so he's having fun.
Yep.
That's
that sounds
cool.
Great. Yeah.
Our local thrift store started upping the cost of vinyl because of the hipsters that come in to buy the vinyl.
I can see that. Hey,
and
supply and demand.
It's frustrating. Adrian also appreciated our tongue-in-cheek opinions on what hi-fi, and now he wants to hear Tom have a conversation with stereophile and analog planet writer Michael Fremer. Adrian wants to place over-under bets on how many minutes before Tom would tell Michael he's full of BS. I used to read Stereophile magazine just because it was so much fun. I was like, how many adjectives can you use for black backgrounds?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They like the subjective, superfluous terms when it comes to describing audio.
In fact, if you're measuring things and doing double blind, you're doing it wrong. Because that's not how you listen to music.
So I haven't actually read a whole bunch of Michael Fremer articles or reviews or editorials, so I'm not super. I mean, I've heard of his name, I've seen his name around, but I'm not super duper familiar with him. But then again, when you write for a place called Analog Planet, I have a sneaking suspicion about what sort of views there might be. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to place a bet? How many minutes of Tom talking to Michael Fremer before Tom says Michael is full of BS? What do you think?
One. I'm gonna go one.
1 minute.
1 minute. Yeah.
He can't last 1 minute.
I couldn't.
I will take that bet just because I know Tom well enough that he might just sit there and roll his eyes for at least a minute, and then it would
okay, I guess if the bet is specifically before he blurts out BS and maybe not the abbreviation that I'm saying, okay, maybe he could hold out 4 minutes.
Well, Ray Coronado just chimed in. He said Fremer is crazy. So
one. I'll go back to one then.
Back to one. All right, I might be losing that bet. We'll have to try and set that up and find out.
I would love to hear it. I mean, I would do pay-per-view on that one. All right, so are we going back to last week's questions now?
We do. We had a couple questions left over from last week. I'll quickly blur it out once again. If you want to get your questions answered, send them to question@avrant.com, and please CC Rob at avrant.com and Tom at avrant.com. Right. And we'll add them to our list and answer them on the show like we're about to do.
That's right. Questions are what this show is all about. As the French would say, it's our raison d'etre. I speak French really well. Yeah. Well, I just had some horse divers for dinner. Yeah. Infinite Gary, again, suppose, he says, you have a top-of-the-line home theater projector such as a JVC, Sony, or Runco, and an OLED flat panel. With both properly calibrated, the OLED will obviously be brighter, but how much brighter? Compared to a standard light bulb, would the projector be, say, a 40-watt and the OLED a 200-watt? Can you make that conversion, Rob?
Well, I can do my best. Now, obviously, we have to bring them both down to the same screen size.
Right, so that's where you have said, like, let's make them both 65-inch screens.
Sure, yeah, because we're talking about foot Lamberts or nits, which is based on the size of the screen, right? It's how much light is coming back, but based on the square footage or based on how many square meters the area of the screen. So we have to start with them both being the same size, and we could do that. There's no reason you couldn't throw a 65-inch image with a projector.
And it would be super bright. bright, I would think, at 65
It
inches.
would be for out of most projectors, but let's assume we're calibrating them. So with a projector with HDR, we'd be targeting 30-foot Lamberts or 100 nits. That's where a projector should be set. So let's say we did that at a 65-inch screen size. You would need about 375 lumens coming out of that projector. Now, you can look up how many lumens come out of your standard incandescent light bulbs, and 375 lumens is less than what a 40-watt light bulb produces.
Okay.
So it's not even as bright as a 40-watt light bulb, so if you're just looking at a 40-watt light bulb, it's even dimmer than that. That's what's coming out to create a 65-inch screen at 100 nits with a projector. Now, when we're talking about OLEDs that are HDR capable, they're in the range of 550 to 600 nits at their brightest. That works out to about 160 to 175 foot Lamberts. So once again, going with a 65-inch screen size, you'd be seeing somewhere between 2,000 and 2,200 lumens at that point. Now, that's more than a 100-watt light bulb, but a little bit less than a 150-watt light bulb, regular incandescent. So you're somewhere in that range of brightness between a 100-watt and 150-watt light bulb. That's about how much brighter the OLED would look. So that can give you a rough idea.
So when you calibrate them properly, the calibration for a projector is much lower.
Oh, yes. Yes.
In the foot Lambert output.
Yeah.
Therefore, if they're the same size, the projector's putting out a lot less. And you're saying, comparatively, less than a 40-watt bulb, somewhere between 100 and 150-watt bulb for the OLED calibrated properly for that size.
Yeah. So if you want to imagine how much brighter a flat panel looks than a projector, that's roughly what's going on.
But you could probably make a 65-inch projection as bright as an OLED.
Yeah.
But then you wouldn't have good black levels.
Probably not. Yeah, it's because there are projectors that can get up in that 2,000 lumen output range. Those exist. And if you shrunk them down to be projecting a 65-inch screen size, then they'd be just as bright as the OLED.
Okay. That actually makes sense.
Yay.
I understood that. Also, he asks, how does the light level of the LG Gallery OLED from 2014 compare to the current LG B6 OLED? It seems to Gary the Gallery is dimmer, as it seems to be more comfortable for his eyes to look at, but that's just a guess.
It is dimmer. Those ones topped out at about 200 nits, the LG Gallery OLEDs from 2014, whereas the new B6s are 550 to 600. So they're more than twice as bright. That could explain it.
Were the 2014 models the ones that were 1080p as opposed to 4K?
Yeah, most of them were. The Gallery was the only flat one, because back then it was OLEDs and they were all curved. So
that's right.
Yeah, but they
last
weren't
time
as
I was
bright.
at Best Buy, I was getting so much flack about curved versus flat. There was
people are coming around. We're going back to flat, thankfully.
Yeah. There was a disciple of the Church of Curved at Best Buy last time I was there, and he was trying to convert me, and it just wasn't working. All right, so some more from Infinite Gary. He says, in the future, when he inevitably buys a 4K HDR projector, will he need to replace his projection screen at the same time to get full image quality? He uses a Stewart Film Screen Studio Tech 130. Now, my guess would be maybe, probably.
If that's your screen, the Studio Tech 130 from Stewart Film Screen,
maybe
then
not.
No, you don't have
excellent.
to. That is a textureless, completely flat. It's not acoustically transparent, so it's just a flat, textureless screen. There's no problem throwing any resolution. You can throw 8K or 16K on there. It'll still look great.
Gotcha.
The reason some people feel that they need to replace their screen, and why some screens are marketed as being 4K and others are marketed as being 2K, is if they do have a texture of some sort. So some have a coating on them to help them reject ambient light, or some are acoustically transparent and either have perforated holes or a weave in them. So if the weave is fairly open to the point that the holes created by the weave are some significant portion of the size of the pixels that are being sent to the screen. Of course, if you have more pixels going to the screen, then each pixel is smaller. So that's why. If you have a textured screen or a screen with holes in it of some sort, you might need to replace that screen when you go to 4K if the holes are too big or the texture is too visible. But
but he's good.
He's good because his is flat and textureless.
Beautiful. One more from him. On the Home Theater Geeks podcast from 2 weeks ago, the guest, Florian Friedrich, described how LG's current OLED TVs use a fourth white subpixel to help them boost their light output. But this means that pure primary colors cannot get as bright as the peak light output for white.
Yeah,
Gary,
so in a regular screen, each pixel is made up of 3 subpixels, a red,
right?
green, and blue subpixel. Now, if you have red, green, and blue all active at the same time, you get
You
white.
get white, right?
But with the LG OLEDs, what they're actually doing, the OLEDs themselves are white. They're just showing white. So you have a white OLED for each pixel, and then they have little filters in front of them: red, green, blue, and white. Little filters in front of them. So they can boost the peak brightness by shining an OLED through the white filter only. And then, of course, if you shone it through all 4, you'd still have white, but even brighter. But that means when you're showing one of the individual colors, then you don't have the benefit of that 4th white subpixel adding to the brightness.
So that 4th white is just to boost some whites,
Just
or very
peak
bright.
bright. Yeah,
Oh,
peak white.
okay.
That's what it's there for.
So is that kind of a trick to get that overall nits up?
It kind of is, yeah.
Yeah,
It a little bit is, yeah. So
kind
you,
of a
you
trick.
couldn't get like 550 nit pure red. You wouldn't be able to do
Right,
that. You can
right.
get 550 nit pure white,
Mm.
but that means all 4 of those subpixels are active.
So that's not useful for all the colors. That's useful for those bright, for your explosions, basically.
Yeah, for those really bright highlights, the glint off of chrome or off of a wave or something
I
like
see.
that. Yeah.
Interesting. A little tricky, but okay. Okay. I can't speak from experience, so what do I know? Gary was comparing his OLED side by side with his Kuro Plasma. Both are professionally calibrated, and he did notice that certain colors, mostly reds, looked a little more washed out and less saturated on the OLED, but they also clearly looked brighter. Could that all be due to this white subpixel?
It's not impossible, but at the same time, there's the part of our human visual system, which is that as colors get brighter, just more photons of a given color are hitting our eye, our perception of that color also changes a little bit.
Right.
So even though the color itself might be the exact same wavelength, kept all the way, if as it gets brighter and brighter, our perception of it changes a little bit, and we tend to see it as getting more and more washed out. So I'm not saying what he's proposing is not the case. They might be adding that 4th white subpixel just to boost the brightness, and that's affecting it. Or the red could just genuinely be brighter than the Kuro red, and even though they're the same wavelength, your eye will perceive it as a slightly lighter shade of red.
They
just
are
because it's
supposed to
brighter.
be the same wavelength of red. They're supposed to be
Well,
the same color, because would the color
that's-
space be different on one versus the other?
That's a little bit about what Dolby Vision is trying to do with HDR, because Dolby
Right.
Vision says, well, we know your perception of the color changes, so we're actually going to tweak the color as it gets brighter on a frame by frame basis, thanks to our dynamic metadata, to keep
Right.
it looking like the same shade to your non-linear human eyes. Whereas HDR10 does not do that. HDR10 sets it once and forgets it. So
Right.
yeah, there's several things potentially going on here, but it's not impossible. They might actually be using that 4th white subpixel just to boost the brightness, which will make it look more washed out. So I can't say for certain what's happening in that case, but there are multiple explanations of why it might have looked that way.
Gotcha. And finally, from Gary, he tried an experiment. His gear is in an equipment stand behind his roll-down projection screen. He covered all the front displays and status lights, and it improved the contrast of his projected image. Encouraged by that, he put Guilford of Maine cloth over all of his front speakers, which are glossy, to further reduce any ambient light or reflections. He says it's almost like getting a new higher contrast projector. Now that's some big talk for just covering up some reflections and lights.
Well, it can be surprising. I mean, Gary's theater is dedicated. It's completely blacked out. When he turns the lights off, it's a completely blacked out. You can't see your hand an inch in front of your face type of situation. So
It's a little scary.
when you're starting with things being that dark in your theater, and he's got fabric on his walls, so he doesn't have reflective walls. He doesn't have like a satin finish paint or something like that. As soon as you introduce any light, it can be the little status LED on the front of your Blu-ray player, right? You introduce any light, it's remarkable how much that can make it back onto your projection screen and alter your perception of the contrast, and having some reflection coming from your glossy speakers as opposed to no reflections at all.
Also,
it's remarkable how much light gets back onto the screen.
would your human eyes be adjusting to that little bit of extra light coming from the displays of your equipment? And in other words, would your eyes say, "Oh, I need to I'm talking in camera terms, stop down.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, if
the
they
aperture.
were in your field of view, like in his case, they're behind the
Behind him.
screen, so that light is somehow getting out into the room and then getting back onto the screen. It's not that he's actually looking at a front display or looking at a status LED. But yeah, all of it. When you have a truly blacked out room, it takes exceedingly little ambient light to make a visible difference. Now, Tom often says he doesn't care if you have glossy speakers and a projection screen because most people don't have a truly blacked out room.
Right.
So usually there's some other form of ambient light in the room that is exceeding whatever's going to come off the reflection of your slightly glossy speaker or off of your, front panel display, something like that. If that's the case, then you're not really going to notice the difference. But when you have a black hole of a room, it's an exceedingly small.
So I wonder if he turns off everything except the displays on his equipment, does his screen glow just a little bit?
I don't know.
Does he see a slight glow on the screen?
There might be a tiny little bit because it's a slightly positive grain screen. So,
all right. Well, Infinite Gary did not last to infinity. We are now on to Nick B.
Yes.
Nick B sent diagrams.
He sure did. I'm going to pop those up there in a second, but
okay.
You can go ahead and start.
He is still concerned about seeing the weave of an acoustically transparent screen from his close viewing distance. He wants to sit one screen width away from a 115-inch diagonal screen, and he also wants to be able to hit 100 nits, 30-foot Lamberts, for HDR viewing. With his current plans, that places him less than 8.5 feet from eyes to screen for a 115-inch diagonal screen. That's
115-inch diagonal is 100 inches wide, so that's basically 8.35 feet wide. So he wants the same distance across the screen as from the screen, so he wants to be 8.35 feet away.
All right, that'll be fun. I'll say that. He's concerned because he found a comprehensive review of many screen surfaces posted over at AccuCal HD, and we have a link to a PDF that we will share for that if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, come to avrant.com. We put up all the links and our show notes there. So stuff we talk about, products we recommend, you'll find the links at avrant.com.
Right. Rob mentioned the Seymour AV Center Stage UF fabric, which does come recommended in that review write-up and is described as having one of the tightest weaves while producing essentially no color shift and only attenuating the audio by 2 dB up at 20 kilohertz. But the reviewer says that at 8 feet, the weave is slightly visible and that he needed to be 10 feet away in order for the screen to look completely smooth. Its rating of having a 0.8 gain was also measured as being accurate.
Which was interesting because almost no other screen's rated gains were measured as being exactly what they rated it at. But the Center Stage UF, it matched exactly basically all of the specs that Seymour gave were measured to be exactly the same by this particular reviewer.
Wow. Well, bless them. That's what you want to see.
That's nice. That means you can kind of count on their specs. So, I mean, he's concerned about this, and I don't blame him. He describes himself as being more of a videophile than an audiophile, even though he's going to great extent to try and get the best audio experience that he also can. But, he's a little concerned that this reviewer said at 8 feet, and he's only slightly more than 8 feet away, that you could see a little bit of the weave. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the reviewer was looking largely at test patterns and full field white, full field primary colors. And then he did also watch some content. So when he says slightly visible, that might mean when you put up a pure white field, you can maybe slightly see the weave, slightly see this texture of the screen. And that I would super duper not worry about because how often are you looking at a full field white or a full field primary color? Now it's not impossible that if you're very picky that on some real content, it might be possible to see some of that weave. But Seymour themselves describe their screen as basically with the Center Stage UF. They don't say this about their Center Stage XD, which was also very highly rated, but has a not quite as tight weave, and therefore you need to be at least about 10 feet away. And Seymour says that. When they describe their own UF fabric, they're like, you can pretty much sit as close as you want, because other than throwing up a full white field, you're not going to see the texture.
Right. I have a feeling at 8.5 feet, if the company says 10 feet and you said 8.5 feet and you're watching typical content, I bet this isn't going to be a problem. And not only that, if you ever saw it a little bit, you're going to see it one time and your brain's going to filter it out and you'll never see it again.
Well, unless you're the super duper picker type, when you're going to, now that you've seen it once, you can never unsee it.
Okay, well, if you're that kind of person. Like for me, I remember when I first got the plasma TV years ago, and I could tell that it had that sort of banding where You know, it had to do gradients of colors in little steps. And it drove me nuts. I was like, ooh, this makes me mad. This was expensive. And like 3 days later, I was like, what? You know, just enjoying my TV after that. So there might be some measure of like, you get over it after a day.
Right. No, my opinion is that, and this AccuCal reviewer was being very strict and very picky, and I'm fine with that. That's great. That's what you want in a review. You don't want someone letting stuff slide. But when he says slightly visible at 8 feet using test patterns and completely smooth looking at 10 feet, like to me, if you're about 8.35 feet away, I'm personally not worried about it because I mean, there's so much worse to begin with. I've seen so much more heavily textured screens. When he says slight, I believe this reviewer, right? Because when he's describing other textured screens, he doesn't use the word slight. He says you can clearly see it at this distance. So he's saying it's slightly there, and I believe him when he says that. My personal opinion is I wouldn't be hugely concerned about this. I think it will look fine. But, I mean, get a sample. All of these screen companies will send you a sample of the fabric.
Are we just locked into that one-to-one viewing distance to screen ratio?
Yeah, he pretty much is.
Okay, so. I'm just wondering how he came up with that. If that's just what he wants.
That's what he likes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I just wondered if there was like something he read or that felt he needed to match something.
No, that was taking our advice of figuring out where you like to sit in the movie theater and matching that up in your home experience. So.
Great. Okay, great. Well, then that's what he wants. Probably he's going to be very happy.
I really believe so. And start with a sample, but I really believe that you should not eliminate the UF based on what that reviewer said, because I believe him when he says it's very slight, and I don't think you'll see it the majority of the time with actual content.
So shall I skip on to his next item?
Yes, let's do it.
Part B. With all of those concerns, there weren't any acoustically transparent screens in the review that would be a better choice than the Center Stage UF. So Nick is considering using a regular, non-acoustically transparent screen. There'd be no concerns about the texture of the screen, and if he opted for a screen with a slightly greater than 1.0 gain, he'd be able to get more than 100 nits, especially when he masks down the screen size and zooms in the projector to fill a smaller image size. All those positives are, of course, offset by having to put the center speaker below the screen and the front, left, right speakers on either side. So how much will that affect sound quality, and which is the better sacrifice or compromise? Boy, that's tough. What drives you more nuts?
Yeah, and that's a great question and a extremely valid question. And I mean, he's asking us for our opinion and our advice. And my opinion is I would go for the Center Stage UF so that I can have my center speaker at the very least where I want it, because that's the dream. The dream is to be able to actually have your center speaker at ear height like you're supposed to. And he's got 2 rows of seats. Now, he said his second row of seats is very much secondary. He's really only concerned with the front row of seats. But when you got 2 row of seats and then you have to put a center speaker below the screen, then the front row is definitely blocking that sound from getting to the back row. And with a screen this size and sitting this close, if you were to put the center speaker above the screen, you're going to notice that it's above the screen.
There, I'm with you.
I say go for the acoustically transparent because, going back to the previous question, I really don't think it's going to be a huge sacrifice. I really don't think the very slight texture of that very fine, ultra-fine weave is going to bother you visually. I say go for acoustically transparent.
Yeah, plus, don't forget, then you get that sort of magic, there are no speakers kind of look to your theater. And that's something that I'd love to achieve if I ever had the money to build a different house. You know, I would want that. It looks like magic.
Yeah, if I can convince you, go for the acoustically transparent, put that center speaker at your height. That's what I'll say.
There you go. Okay, next part to his question. He's considering the Epson LS10000 laser-based projector. Reviews have said that after calibration, it can output 1,300 lumens, which probably give you about an 80-watt bulb on a 65-inch screen or something, whatever we talked about earlier. So is it a good model for him to buy, that laser-based projector from Epson?
So I just have to give you the warning, it doesn't handle HDR. Even though like it has what I would consider the capability to do it, it doesn't have HDMI 2.0A ports. It doesn't understand HDR10. It doesn't understand Dolby Vision. It does actually understand it can display a wider color gamut, but it doesn't understand the signal being sent to it in an HDR10 or a Dolby Vision format to use it.
I see.
And it can't be upgraded. Now, I'm expecting there will be an update to that projector at some point. Epson doesn't sit around for ages and ages before it replaces models. They could literally keep the exact same light engine and the same panels and everything and just give it HDMI 2.0A ports with HDR10 understanding. They're gonna have their home cinema 5040 and their pro cinema 6040. Both of those are regular bulb based regular LCD projectors, but both of those understand HDR10. So I can't in good faith tell you to go buy the LS10000 right now, because he already says he wants HDR, and the LS10000 can't do HDR. So
yeah, I'm gonna say let's skip that.
Yeah,
it sounds like that laser-based projector is more about just getting incredible brightness, and it probably gets the standard color space correct.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I'm very much looking forward to whatever model replaces the LS10000,
right?
Because I'm darn sure it will be HDR capable. So I have to recommend that you wait for that.
Yeah.
It hasn't been announced yet. Maybe it will be longer than I think. But like I say, they could literally take the LS10000, just give it HDMI 2.8 ports and a
little bit of
the processing to do
processing.
HDR10. Yeah. So
right.
I think that's coming.
All right, so finally, one more from him. He's a little confused why we've recommended twice now to move his front, left, right speakers behind the acoustically transparent screen if he does end up using an acoustically transparent screen, which we hope he will. With the speakers on either side of the screen, he ends up with a 30-degree angle to the left and right of center. This is still within Dolby's guidelines, and it would also allow the second row to still have angles that would fall within Dolby's guidelines. So are we concerned about the speakers being too close to the side walls, or what is our reason for continuing to suggest putting the speakers behind the screen?
Right. So very good question. So if you're watching the YouTube feed, I've got a diagram up. So he's shown, with actual dimensions.
Yes.
So in the current image, he's showing with the front, left, and right speakers to the sides of the screen. And you'll notice he has planned out his Atmos speakers and his surround back speakers. And when he puts the front, left, and right speakers to the outside of the screen, they do not line up. They're not all in a row. Whereas if we switch over to where he's got the front, left, and right speakers just inside of the edges of the screen, which is still within the Dolby recommended angles, certainly at least for that front row, now all the speakers line up in a row just exactly like they're supposed to in Dolby Atmos. So that was kind of where I was coming from, because I'm like, you already got your, like, if you were to spread out the surround back, the top front, the top rear speakers, spread them even more to the sides so that they would be in line with the front, left, and right speakers if they were on the outside of the screen. Now they are getting very close to those side walls. And I'm a little bit, like the distance between your right surround speaker and your top front right speaker is going to be very close. And they might even start to sound redundant with one another. Right. So I think what makes more sense, since you're still within Dolby's guidelines either way, to me, it makes more sense to put the front, left, and right speakers behind that screen so that all of them line up in a row the way that they're intended to. That's pretty much my reasoning for that. So
I see what you're saying. It's a symmetry thing, and you don't want all those speakers getting too close to the outside walls.
Yeah. You do want to have some separation between your surrounds, your surround backs, and your top speakers. You don't want things sounding redundant, because then that kind of defeats the purpose. And Dolby wants you to have all of those speakers in a row, and that happens if he puts them behind his screen. So
yeah, it gets too close. I see what you're saying. Okay, there's a little more information. So now we're finally up to new questions.
Yeah.
It only took 45 minutes. New for this week, Ian E. has heard people talk about TVs and projectors having ISF day and night modes, and other devices having ISF CCC, certified calibration configuration. Can we explain what these are and why anyone would want them? Particularly, do display devices that have the day-night mode automatically switch based on time or ambient light? I have not seen one automatically switch. Have you?
No, that's not what these ISF modes are about. So the easiest way to think about it, let's start with that last question just to answer it really clearly. No, they do not switch based on the time of day or based on the ambient light. Now, some televisions do give you some sort of little light sensor. And they will adjust their gamma or their backlight or how much light they output based on that light sensor. But that has nothing to do with the ISF modes. That is something the manufacturer decided to do on their own. So that's to answer that part. Now, the ISF day and night picture modes, the easiest way to think of them they're just memory banks.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
they are. They're not preset out of the factory. Like if you bring the TV home and you put it into the ISF day or the ISF night picture mode, that doesn't mean you automatically have a calibrated image. It
Right.
didn't come from the factory calibrated. It's just a slot. It's a memory slot that's there that isn't named living room or standard or vivid or
Because they
theater,
don't know
whatever.
what your room looks like at the factory. I will say it can look pretty good. I just recently saw an LG TV that the ISF day and night modes actually were much better than any of the other preset modes. And I put it on ISF night and loved it. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, without, I was like, okay, good. I don't have to sit there and tweak it. This was on vacation at a beach house.
Oh, sure.
And I sit there for hours on vacation, like tweaking a television, driving everybody nuts. But this thing had an ISF day and night. And I was like, good enough. Done.
No, yeah, and because they usually are at least set to like the warm color temperature,
Yeah.
and they haven't blasted out the light output like
Right.
the vivid mode does, you know. So typically when you put them in that modes, they do look a little bit better straight out of the box than say your vivid mode or your, you know, living room mode or something like that. But some people think they're a pre-calibrated mode and they're not. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Right.
What they're really there to do is if you hire an ISF certified calibrator, and your television advertises that it has ISF day and night picture modes, it gives them those memory slots so that they have somewhere to store their settings, and it means that they have the controls that an ISF calibrator will be looking for in order to be able to calibrate your television.
Right.
So a lot of televisions, you go through the user menu and it doesn't have a color management system, or you can adjust the colors, but it's, you know, not as granular as a professional calibrator would like, or you don't have a way to really finely tune the grayscale tracking. You know, it like those controls just aren't available to you. That's up to the manufacturer. They can choose to include those or not. Sometimes you'll get a television, it is not ISF certified, but it still gives you all those controls. So there's still a way to calibrate it. But by having those ISF day and night modes, advertising that this television includes them, it means you are guaranteed that the manufacturer has included all of the calibration controls that an ISF calibrator will be looking for so that they can calibrate your grayscale and calibrate your color management to be accurate. It's giving them those controls. Now,
Of course, in the case of that LG, they give them one extra because I'm sure a calibrator would laugh at the vertical and horizontal sharpness.
oh yeah, they got
That was
those
like
separate.
completely useless. I want it sharp this way and blurry this way.
Yeah, I still don't know
The
why that
weirdest
happened,
thing,
but there it is. The ISF CCC, you will see that on things like AV receivers. And what that tells you is that it gives you some level of calibration control for each input. So like, let's say you get an HDMI AV receiver, it's got 8 HDMI inputs. If it advertises that it has ISF CCC, that means in the AV receiver itself, you can go to each one of those inputs, and it will have some calibration controls. Now, they usually don't give you the full suite of color management and grayscale. What they'll give you is like the basic, white level, black level, your contrast and brightness settings, your tint setting, your basic color setting. Those type of things will be included in there, but you can change those input by input. So that means, let's say, he brought out his test pattern generator. He connected it to your television. He used the ISF day and night modes in your television and got a really accurate picture from your TV using a test pattern generator. Well, now you go and connect your cable box to it or your Blu-ray player to it, and we're not 100% certain that that source device is sending a completely accurate signal to begin with.
Right.
So if for some reason that source device is not, if you run it through an AV receiver that has ISF CCC,
Bring it in line.
now he can use the receiver to specifically tune just that one input just for that one source device. So you don't have to recalibrate the television itself for every single source. You can do it in some other device. So that's more or less what's going on there.
Nice. Are we moving on to Justin?
We are, yeah. I just wanted to mention Ryan T is a fellow who got in touch with us. I just want to bring this up because he was saying, I've got these questions, but, I'm not really sure I want to have them on the podcast. He's like, I'd rather other people get their questions answered. And, he's not, I just want to let everybody know who's thinking of sending in a question, Send us your questions. We
Just
don't have a
send the
show.
question.
We don't have a show if you don't send us questions. We answer home theater and AV questions on this podcast. By all means, we want to answer your questions. We do not care in the least if someone has asked it before. We don't care if someone asked it last week. I know sometimes, I know sometimes we say, oh, we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago or something like that. I don't want anyone to think that means we don't want to say it again. We totally want to say it again. So please feel free to send in your questions.
We want to hear from you. To paraphrase Mr. Rogers, your question is special just because it's your question.
That's right.
Just send us your question. It's okay. So Justin B, but he's not Bieber on Facebook, because that would be pretty cool. Justin has a Marantz SR6010 AV receiver, and he wanted to try out DTS-X. He went to demo-world.eu. demo-world.eu, where they have some DTS-X demos that you can download as MKV files. But when he tried to play them using his home theater PC running Kodi, the SR6010 would only give listening mode options that included DTS HD Master Audio, DTS HD plus Neural X, or DTS HD plus Odyssey DSX. None of those are actually DTS-X, correct? Rob?
Correct.
All right.
None of those are actual DTS-X.
Those are all sort of made up things.
Those are starting with a DTS HD Master Audio 7.1 soundtrack. Then it's saying, well, you can add Neural X upmixing on top of this, or you can add Odyssey DSX upmixing on top of this, but none of those are native DTS.
So Master Audio is a native format. It's a real thing. The Neural X and Odyssey DSX add-ons are attempts to blow them up into the extra channels.
Yeah, those are upmixers so that you can take what started as 7.1 and blow it up to 11 speakers, 7.2.4.
Gotcha. Justin later bought the Blu-ray of American Ultra, which has a DTS-X soundtrack. And when he played that, the SR6010 showed DTS-X right on the front panel. Yay. So it appears as though his SR6010 is working fine and that DTS-X will in fact play. So why didn't those MKV downloads work? Boy, that's going to depend on your home theater PC and what Kodi does.
It can depend on that. Now, what we know is, since his SR6010 was showing DTS HD Master Audio there, we know that it wasn't an issue of it can't send out the bit stream. He was getting the bit stream. Otherwise, it would have said PCM audio, or it might have said standard DTS if it was, down converting it, if it wasn't able to send out the full DTS HD Master Audio bit stream. So we know it's
recognizing Master Audio in the bit stream
and sending out the bit stream. So we know that's not the problem. Now, DTS-X, which is very much like Dolby Atmos, there is metadata on top of the DTS HD Master Audio bitstream. There's metadata on top of that turns it into true DTS-X. In Dolby's case, there's Dolby True HD audio, that's 7.1, and then there's metadata on top of that turns it into Atmos. Now, what I do know is when, let's say you've got a Blu-ray and you are backing it up onto a hard drive, and you're just doing a full one-to-one copy of that disc. Right. So you're doing that either as an ISO image file or you're just doing it as a file structure file and you've backed it up. If you go and play that on a actual Blu-ray player software like Power DVD, then it will play fine. I know that because I've done it.
Yeah,
so
you have that software, right?
Yep, Dolby Atmos, they will play just fine. But if you attempt to play those full one-to-one copies, so the whole disc is there, but you attempt to play that through a direct show type of player, sometimes it loses the metadata.
Okay.
Right? The DTS HD Master Audio bitstream comes out, or the Dolby True HD bitstream comes out, but the Atmos or the DTS-X with that additional metadata, sometimes that doesn't come out of a direct show player. That's one issue. Next, if you reauthor any of your Blu-rays. So you've backed it up on a hard drive, but then you reauthor it
back on a disc.
Yeah, so you're getting rid of the trailers, or you're, let's say it's a television series on a Blu-ray disc and you're separating each of the episodes.
Right.
I don't know of any reauthoring software that maintains the metadata. So what they're doing with these clips is they're taking it off of the DTS demo disc that includes DTS-X soundtracks, but they're clearly reauthoring it if you're getting individual little snippets, right? It's not the whole disc as an image, it's individual little snippets that have been reauthored. I don't know of any reauthoring software that maintains the metadata. That metadata seems to get lost.
So do you think demo-world.eu did it wrong?
No, I don't think there's a way to do it. I'm not. I'm not.
So
Maybe there is, but I'm not aware. Maybe if you had professional software, right? If you had professional video editing software, maybe there's a way to do it that way. But as far as stuff I can do as a consumer, I don't know of any way to do what they did, which is take a demo disc, reauthor it to just show individual clips, put them in MKV containers. You get the bitstream, you get the original bitstream, but that extra metadata seems to get lost. So I think it's as simple as that. Because clearly, when he played an actual physical Blu-ray disc with a DTS:X soundtrack, it all worked. So it's not that his receivers broken.
You could ask the people at demo-world.eu what kind of software you should try to play it with. Yeah. And maybe there's some other individual player that can handle it.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Something else you could download or purchase that would actually send out that metadata.
But clearly the metadata is getting lost in there somewhere. Either it's not in their MKV container to begin with, because I know that that's certainly a possibility, or however you're playing it back isn't able to send the metadata along with the original bit stream. So one way or another, that metadata is getting lost.
Right. All right, then. There's probably your answer. Moving on to Bill R. Bill the Stumper R. Is that because he has stumped you guys?
That was back with his subwoofer thumping when he played Daredevil off of Netflix, and we couldn't figure out what the heck happened, and he reran Odyssey and it all worked fine. So we still have no idea why.
So he's really more Bill the Thumper R.
There you go.
Right. Anyway, so
you like
Bill,
your puns. Lee likes his puns.
I love it. Bill is finally getting around to finishing his basement. He's going to construct an enclosed 14 by 19 by 8-foot ceiling room.
Nice.
That will be his dedicated home theater. And he's working with a local retailer installer for the planning and purchasing. Nice. This retailer installer mostly works with Integra and Anthem AV receivers and processors. Bill had an Integra before and he was happy with it, but he's not as impressed by their current models, which use AccuEQ instead of Odyssey and haven't been updated to support 11 speakers on most of the models. Some of them also still have 10.2 gigabit per second HDMI ports rather than 18 gigabit per second, and not every HDMI port supports HDCP 2.2.
Yes, Bill has done his research, and I am total agreement with you. I don't know what is taking Onkyo/Integra so long. Yeah. All of their most recent models top out at 7 speakers. It's bizarre to me, because Onkyo used to be like the feature leader. Like they came out before everybody supporting the latest stuff, and it's strange.
But doesn't it seem like these products that are designed for installers to work with always move a little slower? Because the installers have to get up. But
that's kind of why Integra used to be so nice, because Integra was just the luxury arm of Onkyo, and Onkyo was always on top of stuff. So I don't know what's going on over there. I don't know. It's strange to me, but I agree. I wouldn't be buying an Integra right now.
So Bill's leaning toward Anthem right now. He wants to do a full Atmos setup as well as a Zone 2, although the Zone 2 is a much lower priority. I know I wanted a Zone 2 when I bought my last receiver. Still haven't used it.
At least you know you got it.
I put that into the kitchen, but I got some cool like computer speakers in the kitchen, and I just use my phone. Anyway, so here comes his questions. How is ARC Anthem Room Correction versus Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32? How do those compare?
Gosh, I mean, there are going to be people on either side who say they prefer one over the other. Anthem Room Correction is primarily parametric. They have a different target curve than Odyssey Multi-Q, and they allow you to alter that target curve manually. The Anthem Room Correction system is done on your PC, so you actually connect the included microphone to your PC, you run their software, and then upload all the settings to the AV receiver. So all the number crunching is being done on your computer. As a result, it does not automatically set your distances and, your distances. It doesn't automatically set your speaker distances, because they don't know if you have some latency in your, when you're plugging in the USB microphone or
on your computer.
On your computer, yeah. So you have to manually set the distances. That's one little difference. Now, is one vastly better than the other? I really can't tell you. I do know that with Multi-Q XT32, with sub EQHT, if you're getting one of the more modern Denon Marantz receivers that has that, that gives you dual independent subwoofer calibration, whereas Anthem Room Correction does not. They have 2 subwoofer outputs, but it's a single mono signal, and it is not independently setting distances and levels for those 2 subs. That's not a huge deal breaker by any means, but it's just one slight difference. I wouldn't feel super strongly one way or the other. Now, that's just me, because there are people who do. There are people out there who feel very strongly one way or the other. I think both can do a very decent job, and I think what's most important is always consider your automated EQ system as the cherry on top. This is not your panacea. This is not the way to tune your system to a bad room. Start with good speakers. Try to acoustically treat your room. Try to get your seat in a good position within that room.
Then do the EQ.
Set up your subwoofers across the room from one another so that they're more uniform. Then after all of that, run your auto EQ to be the cherry on top to try and get things a little more linear. If you approach things that way, they can both do a terrific job.
It's kind of strange. You would think that Anthem, being supposedly sort of, a higher end brand name, why didn't they want to spend the money to put the computing power in the AV receiver?
It's a significant amount of computing power. I mean, it's similar to Dirac. Like Dirac has a lot of number crunching that goes on.
So it's a lot more number crunching than Odyssey is doing.
Yeah, it seems to be.
That's why it needs a computer.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, and also the ability to manually change it. Now, I should mention, Odyssey is going to be coming out with a new app that you can put on your iPhone or your Android phone that will be called the Odyssey app. And using that app, it's going to be a $20 fee. So you pay $20, you get the app. You'll be able to then manually adjust the target curve using that new Odyssey app. Now, that's only going to be supported on the newest Denon and Marantz receivers that aren't going to be coming out till October, November. So that's not going to be a backwards compatible app. You won't be able to use it on AV receivers that you can buy right this moment. But if you're willing to wait until the October-November timeframe, and the one thing that's super important to you is being able to manually adjust the target curve, you'll be able to do that with Odyssey now with a $20 app. So that's going to be pretty nice.
Hey, I'm all about manual adjustments. I told you about my success with my little YPAL.
That's right.
And I went in there and I'm like, ooh, 32.5 hertz, perfect, boom.
That's right. So that used to be the big thing, because before you used to have to pay the $700 fee to upgrade to Odyssey Pro in order to be able to do that with Odyssey. Now it's going to be $20. So not so bad.
That's more like it. More like it. And it'll work on my fancy, lovely phone that I got. I'm going to show it off again because it's my baby. Look at that thing. Anyway, are there any major limitations he should be aware of with the Anthem models? He's thinking along the lines of the HDMI limitations of the Integra models, or perhaps some limitation in Zone 2 capability, or some other feature that isn't immediately obvious.
Right. So on the HDMI front, you got nothing to worry about. Every single port is HDMI 2.0A. Every single port has HDCP 2.2. Same goes for Denon and Marantz, so no worries there. On the Zone 2 capability, a little bit strange, but with the Anthem AV receivers, there are Atmos models that can do 11 speakers. You can send a digital signal to Zone 2, but only via the optical or coax digital inputs. You can't send a signal from an HDMI input to Zone 2.
Okay.
Can't do it. Whereas on the Denon and Marantz models that can do 11 speakers, you can. Now, the Denon and Marantz models have the limitation of that HDMI signal must be 2.0 PCM, so you can't be sending it a full 7.1 surround sound and have that come out of your Zone 2.
Right.
You can only send it 2-channel PCM, but at least you can have an HDMI source, like let's say it's a Roku box or a Chromecast audio or something like that, right? You can send that in via HDMI and have that play out of Zone 2. On the Anthem, you can't. So that's one little limitation.
That seems like yet another a limitation of the processing power on board the receiver. Yeah, it seems strange. Why doesn't the Anthem have more power? Yeah, it seems like they've just put less computing power inside the Anthem.
Or they're just using maybe older architecture, older chips, haven't bothered to upgrade.
Exactly.
So that's one little thing there. Now, another weird thing, the Anthems have no video processing. They have video pass-through. There's no problem taking whatever's coming out of the source, passing it through unadulterated. No problems with the copy protection or anything, but they don't do any video processing. So if you want, for some reason, your AV receiver to upscale your 1080p Blu-rays to 4K before it gets to your display. Maybe you have a 4K display with really crappy upscaling of its own. Well, you can't do that with the Anthems. It's just going to pass through whatever comes into it.
Okay.
So, I mean, all of these things are, maybe they matter to you, maybe you don't, but he's asking what the differences are. Now, also, the Anthem AV receivers They have 5 channels of Class AB amplification. So your front, left, right, center, and surround left, right speakers. Those have Class AB amplification. The remaining channels, they have one model that goes up to 7 built-in amps, and then you can expand it to 11 with external amps. They also have one that has 11 amps built in, but only 5 of them are Class AB. The remaining ones, however many that are, it's either 2 or an additional 6, are Class D at lower wattage.
Oh, wow.
So they're not all equal wattage to all 7 or 11 amplifier outputs, and they're not even all Class AB or all Class D. They're a mix of Class AB and Class D. Again, now, will this ultimately matter to you? Probably not, but it's just something to be aware of.
Now, some people look down their nose at the Class D, right? I mean, it's limited in some way.
It's more efficient by far,
right.
And it tends to be the case that if you have a strange speaker where for some reason in the very high treble the impedance gets very low. Now that's really unusual because most speakers, as you go higher in frequency, the impedance tends to go up. But there are some speakers out there where up in the treble the impedance actually gets lower. Class D amplifiers tend to struggle with that. They tend to have a very difficult time because the whole way they're working is by switching their power supply extremely quickly. And when they're doing that, it becomes difficult to power a low impedance load while also switching exceedingly quickly. So that, but I mean, it's not going to be the case in his speakers. So again, those are the differences. You can decide if any of those matter to you, but it's just some things to be aware of. That's all. I'll also mention the Denon Marantz models, most of them anyway, because there's the 6011 that'll be coming out. That's the one model that can do 11 speakers that cannot, in the Denon and Marantz lineup, be upgraded to Oro 3D decoding. It's a $200 fee to do it, but they can decode Oro 3D and Denon and Marantz. You can't do it on Anthem. And if you want to have front wide speakers, you can do that on Denon and Marantz. You can't do it on the Anthem.
See, you're not selling me on Anthem.
Well, that's
it sounds like Anthem is costing more, but having less features and less processing power. It makes the EQ more difficult with some limitation. So why is it a thing? Because installers use it, is what it sounds like to me, but I'm cynical.
And for a lot of people, if it costs more, they just assume
it's better. Right.
I would go for a Denon or Marantz because they can do all of these things that the Anthem can't, even if maybe you'll never use them, so it won't matter, but they can, and they cost less. So I see very little in the way of downside.
His next question basically is saying he'd be able to get the Anthem model at a discount, but it's still going to be more than a Denon or Marantz.
Yeah.
And we always seem to be recommending Denon and Marantz, so how do they compare?
Yeah.
And if we're talking sound quality-wise or picture quality-wise, is there any difference?
Now, I will say, Anthem makes very good amplifiers.
I'm sure they do.
In my experience with their Class AB amplifiers, which are powering your 5 most important speakers, if you're actually using the internal amps, they do tend to have a slightly lower noise floor.
Okay.
So that's the big advantage. That's the big advantage. The Denon and Marantzes, now the Denon and Marantzes are darn good. All right, they're darn good. It's not like they're noisy in the least, but if you get your ear up close to your tweeter, you'll hear a soft hiss. It's there. They're not a silent noise floor. So if that is the number one most important thing, and all of the other things I've mentioned have no bearing on your setup, then there you go. That would be the one reason to do it.
That's interesting to me because it seems to help prove the point that to get even just a little bit better sound quality than a Denon or Marantz, you have to spend so much more and you give up some other features if that's what you. But that's a thing. Like maybe you're sick of walking past your speaker every day and hearing
but the other thing is the Denon and Marantz are cheaper enough that you could go and get yourself an external 5-channel amp.
That much cheaper. That much cheaper.
So there you go.
Yeah, I'd still go Denon or Marantz.
I would. Yeah,
I would too. Okay,
I'd be shocked if your dealer is unable to procure a Denon or Marantz model because they are widely available. So if the whole idea is you want to give this installer your money because he's putting the whole system together, if they're not able to procure one of a Denon or Marantz model, I don't know what's going on with them. That shouldn't be a challenge for any
That would
installer.
be strange. Yeah. Well, maybe they're just used to doing Anthem day after day and they'd rather not do a Denon or Marantz, and that's something you can talk to them about. Okay, he's got one more topic here. Bill also read an article by Brent Butterworth titled, "What's the ideal speaker driver configuration?" Wow, that'd be a hard question to answer. It avoids getting too technical and strongly suggests reading Vance Dickinson's The Loudspeaker Design Cookbook for more details. But it seems to give a decent overview of the advantages and disadvantages of going from a single driver to a two-way speaker to a three-way and beyond. Brent mentioned some common limitations when using a two-way bookshelf design and how a three-way tower can potentially perform better. So what are our thoughts? And particularly when it comes to the question of the Ascend Acoustic Sierra 2 versus the Sierra Tower Raw that several people have been asking lately.
Yeah. So I mean,
cover there. May I step away for a moment while you begin to answer that question?
Sure, yeah. I'll be talking for a bit here. Back. Honestly, there was nothing in this Brent Butterworth article with which I disagree. I think it's a nicely written article that, like we say, it doesn't get too technical. It just sort of lays out, and it doesn't say this is always better than that. It it stresses that these are somewhat generalities, and that if a speaker is designed really well, or you spend the money to get really good components, that you can overcome some of the common limitations. So it's speaking in very general terms. And so, of course, when you're talking about a two-way bookshelf speaker, you've got a tweeter and a woofer. And between that tweeter and woofer, you're trying to cover whatever portion of the audible frequency spectrum that you're trying to cover. And he points out, of course, the limitation usually, if you're using a smaller woofer, a 5 1/4 inch or a 6.5 inch woofer, that it won't be able to put out 20 hertz bass. It won't be able to play super loud in the bass. That's just a limitation of having a smaller driver. But you can always add a subwoofer, or of course, like we will say, more than one subwoofer, 2 or 4 subwoofers, and overcome that and essentially create your own three-way speaker, because now you're crossing over a two-way speaker into a pair of subwoofers. You've just created a three-way speaker by doing that. But he's bringing up it. If you have a three-way tower, then you've got a tweeter, a dedicated mid-range driver, and then one or more larger bass woofers. That means it'll be able to play louder. You have more radiating surface area. It will probably be able to play deeper in the bass. You have larger drivers that are only playing bass, and they're probably in a larger cabinet. And maybe that's a larger cabinet with a port, and since it's a larger cabinet, the port can be longer. So the tuning of that port can be lower. I mean, all of these things are just objectively true.
Sure.
But it comes back to application. If you have a very large room and you're sitting very far away, you're going to want a speaker that can simply play louder. And as we've been talking about recently, in the 80 to 500 hertz range, which is entirely being played by your speaker, that is still bass. And if you have a very large volume of air to try and pressurize, the speaker itself needs to be able to do that in that 80 to 500 hertz range. And a small bookshelf two-way speaker is going to struggle to do that. So it's application specific. And, Brent Butterworth doesn't explicitly say that, but he's just pointing out here are some common limitations, and they all totally make sense. If you have fewer and smaller drivers, you probably can't play as loud and as low.
Also, if you try to get a larger driver to do higher frequencies, it becomes far more directional, right?
Yes, yeah. And that's just because as the wavelength gets shorter, eventually you get to a point where the wavelength of the sound is shorter than the distance from the left side to the right side of the driver itself, at which point the driver becomes a horn for that frequency, and it starts beaming it like putting a megaphone in front of your mouth.
Okay, yeah. So, I never thought of it that way. It becomes a directing body.
That's right.
Horn.
Yeah. So, it's worth a read if you're interested in this stuff. It doesn't come to this is always the best solution conclusion, nor should it. But specifically when it comes to like the Ascend Sierra 2s versus the towers, I will simply say, consider your application. If you're in a smaller room sitting closer, the towers, you're never going to use their output. As long as you're crossing over to subwoofers, you don't need their bass output anyway. You should be crossing over to subwoofers because the position of the speakers is not going to be the best position in the room.
And I know you're looking at me when you say that. Yes. You must be looking at me when you say that, because I'm using the towers, those 15-inch woofers on my towers, because I can't get subwoofers yet.
That's right. So yeah, the concerns that he's bringing up, what a three-way tower can do that a two-way bookshelf speaker cannot, all true stuff, but it's application specific. So
there we go.
That's how I come at that.
Are we moving on to Ted Manassa?
Sure. Yes.
Is it Manassa?
It's Manassa. Yeah. It was typo last time. I remember you said Masana, and that was a typo.
Okay.
Transposed the N and the S in his name.
Masana Manassa is sending back the M&K MP150 MK2s he was auditioning. What? They were very harsh and had poor imaging. He liked the Totem Tribe 3s he was also trying, but they're made by the same company that makes Beaks, Beaks, which are little metal doodads that you place on top of speaker cabinets to, quote, suppress parasitic resonances. And he
magic
can't
rocks.
he can't in good conscience buy speakers from a company that also sells beaks.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. Yeah.
Isn't that frustrating when it's like you know, somebody says, hey, you like this wine? You take a sip and you go, yeah. And they're like, haha, it's $5. You're a cheapskate. And you go, oh, okay. I have cheap taste. I don't know what.
No, yeah, that's horrible. That is complete snake oil. I mean, well, I guess if the speaker physically rattles, you could add some rattle to it by putting a piece of metal on top of it. You know?
Yeah.
Stick some metal washers on top of your subwoofer and maybe you'll hear some extra rattles.
If you're not eliminating the parasitic resonances, you're probably not saying the magic words and moving your hand over it correctly. You have to wave your hand over it just right.
No, I agree. No, it's funny that he decided, because when we talked about his getting the M&K MP 150s, and I still think they're overall good speakers, but it's so difficult because when someone asks you a question like, here's what I'm getting or whatever, it's like, what are we really supposed to say? Like, we don't want to make anybody feel bad about their purchase. That's not what we're here to do. And I don't think they were a bad purchase. I tried to subtly imply that I still would have gone for the Sierra 2s that we had originally recommended. Or that, in fact, Ascend's much less expensive SE series speakers are actually just as good as or better than the M&Ks, which cost a lot more. So I tried to subtly imply that, and now if I had done so, then Ted would have been in agreement. But I don't know. He might have written back and said, "What are you talking about? I love these more than any other speakers." So it puts us in a...
Y'all just listen to this beautiful Canadian version of "I Told You So." Listen to how sweet that is.
It puts us in a tough spot. I never want to hurt anyone's feeling. And they're not terrible speakers. It's just they didn't turn out right for his application. So
right.
That's good. They're going
back. Okay.
All right.
And you know, on the other side of the coin, if you buy something that someone on this show says they don't like or they don't recommend, but you end up loving it, then you love it and it's the right choice.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's okay. But in this case, so what is he hearing that's harsh and poor imaging? What is it about that speaker?
Yeah, well, the imaging I'm really not surprised at. That was never a strong suit of those M&K speakers. They are meant to be studio monitors. They are meant to be individual discrete channels. They've got this strange design of 3 tweeters all stacked on top of each other next to 2 woofers. And they're the THX design, which aims to have very narrow vertical dispersion to begin with. And Ted was kind of putting them up a little bit high, even though they're angled down. So there are a lot of things here. And with those 3 tweeters, and there's a reason why they have 3 tweeters, because they're actually really cheap tweeters.
So 3 cheap tweeters made them harsh. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah. So it's not a super duper shock, I'm sorry to say.
Well, now he's looking at the Legacy Audio Silhouette on walls, which despite being on walls weigh 54 pounds.
And they're really expensive.
They are really on the wall.
Yeah.
Have we heard any Legacy audio speakers with the Air Motion tweeters and Rojacell woofers? If so, or if not, what are our thoughts? I have not.
I've heard one pair of Legacy audio speakers. I can't remember which towers they were, the exact model, because they have several. They're excellent sounding. I really, really like them. They're expensive, but they're really nice sounding. I don't know if these on-wall silhouettes sound just as good or better or worse. I'm not sure, but just the general Legacy sound that I heard from that one pair of towers was really excellent sound.
Okay.
So if you were to get them, I would be saying you're getting excellently made speakers with very nice parts that, in the one version of their speaker that I heard sounded really, really nice. You're certainly paying a hefty price for it. So I did want to mention, they actually do have a Pro series, and the Pro series is much less fancy looking. It's just a black box versus the consumer version of the Silhouette, which is like really glossy and fancy and has, special chamfered edges and, it's a fancy looking design and nice wood finishes. So the Pro version is just very basic and it's less expensive as a result.
And does it have the same drivers?
Same exact drivers, same exact internals, but just a cheaper cabinet. That's all, because it might be going in a blacked out room. So why look fancy?
How much of a difference in price?
It's about $1,000 per speaker.
Woo!
just for that cabinet. So could be well worth your while. On the other hand,
That's a lot.
I am going to suggest to Ted, and this is one I suggested before, but we kind of let it fall by the wayside. But now it's coming back around. Sunfire. A lot of people know Sunfire for their amplifiers, but they do also make
Yeah.
on-wall speakers. And I know Ted, even though he has a very small room, is supremely worried about high output capabilities. Well, these Sunfires, being that they come from a manufacturer that primarily makes really high powered amplifiers, they can absorb over 400 watts and play really, really loud if you want them to. So
Wow.
output capability, not a problem with these Sunfires. They have their Cinema Ribbon Trios. They go for about $12.50 each, which is actually about the same price as those M&K speakers, to be honest.
Okay.
So if he was willing to get the M&Ks, these aren't any more expensive. These have folded ribbon tweeters as well.
Okay.
And they can play super duper loud. I wouldn't say they're a purely neutral speaker.
Is there a way to characterize what that folded ribbon does to the
Well, I
sound
mean,
compared to a standard
like Tom was
tweeter?
always saying, the how you make the tweeter, it all comes back to the design, how it ultimately sounds. A folded ribbon has the advantage of lots of surface area that doesn't have to move very far.
Okay.
So that tends to mean faster transient response because, you're wiggling something very little as opposed to a long excursion to get the same output because lots
Sure.
of surface area because it's pleated. They tend to have narrower dispersion because you are actually squeezing the air out as opposed to vibrating like a piston.
Okay.
So they tend to have narrower dispersion. They tend to have very fast transient response. And these Sunfires, I wouldn't say are 100% neutral in their sound. I think they have a little bit of a characteristic sound to them, but really nice sounding. They can certainly play really loud. The price is better than the Legacies. So to me, they're worth checking out. That's all.
And Sunfire made little tiny compact subs, right, with big giant
Yeah.
amps in them. Yeah, I remember
They were
seeing
one of
ads
those
for
who did
that.
that too. Yeah.
All right, on to George M.
Mm-hmm.
He's owned an SVS PB13 Ultra since before listening to AV Rant, but since becoming a listener, he's come to realize that one sub is not enough.
Yay!
That's right. If you learn anything, see, that's why I don't have a sub yet, because I can't go to one sub. I've been
to
on
wait
this
till
show
you
too
get
many
two.
times. I've got to go to two. So anyway, his theater is 12 by 13 with 10-foot ceilings, with a 110-inch screen and an Epson 5030 UV projector. Would an SB1000 pair well with the PB13 Ultra and be enough to provide the benefits of dual subs?
So these are literally the opposite ends of SVS's lineup. It is their smallest,
Right.
least expensive sub versus their biggest, most powerful sub. However, he's putting them in a 12 by 13 by 10-foot room, which is let's see. Does that work out to slightly more than 1,500 cubic feet?
You want me to do math that fast? I can open the calculator on my computer.
Anyway, you're very close to being a small room. If not, you're on the very low end of a medium-sized room.
Yes.
So first of all, that PB13 Ultra can be put into sealed mode. So as far as the roll off on the low end and the extension into the low end, by putting the PB13 Ultra into sealed mode, it'll be closer to the sealed performance of an SB1000 or maybe an SB2000. Clearly, the SB1000 cannot play anywhere near as loud as the PB13 Ultra, but in this
But it may
size
not
of
have
room,
to.
it's probably sufficient. And if you put that SB1000, because I'm assuming he doesn't have his seats dead center in his room.
Let's hope not.
With it being 13 feet long and a 110-inch screen, I'm assuming he's closer to the back wall of his room than the front wall, which means one of your subs will be closer to your seats than the others, which means you would be making one of them quieter than the other because you're going to level match them. Honestly, the SB1000 wouldn't be out of place here. Now, it seems crazy to match it with a PB13 Ultra. You certainly wouldn't want to in a much larger room. But in this room, actually, yeah, this would
So
probably
in a
be
small
fine.
room, putting it closer to you than the PB13 Ultra and then putting the PB13 Ultra in a sealed mode,
Yep.
you probably have a decent match given his situation.
Yeah, the PB13 Ultra is going to be turned way down, but that's fine.
Sure. I mean, the
fine.
PB13 Ultra is going to fall asleep in this situation. It's not going to be impressed. Right?
But yeah, no, this, as surprising it is, this really isn't out of place. Now,
Okay.
I don't know George's room exactly. Sometimes people say, I have a 12 by 13 by 10-foot room, but they don't always tell us if it has a permanent opening to some other part of the
like
house.
my foyer off on one side of my room.
Right, or you're in your living room space and that's that size, but it's completely open to the kitchen and dining room behind you or something like that, right? If that's the case, George, then everything I said is out the window. If this is a
Right.
sealed room, it's an enclosed room
You
with
can
a door
close
you can
the
close,
door.
and it's only 12 by 13 by 10, then the SB1000 is fine in there. But if you have permanent openings to some other part of your house, you have to consider the entire open volume of air, not just your designated theater area. So that could vastly change my answer. But assuming it's an enclosed room, I actually think the SP1000 is fine.
Because the goal here is to get the two subs to play the same frequencies at about the same level, so you can eliminate nulls and peaks.
That's right. You can think of them as acting as active bass traps for one another. That's why you put them across the room from each other. So, yeah.
All right. Moving on to an anonymous questioner.
That's right.
So it's going to be something dirty.
No, it's just
Okay.
again, one of those folks who was like, I don't really know if I want this on the podcast. I'm like, this is a really good question.
Oh, okay.
I want to answer it anyway. I will, of course, we will respect anyone who doesn't want us to say their name or they're embarrassed. Please never feel embarrassed by any question you want to ask.
Absolutely.
If you want to ask us, what's a speaker? Ask us. We will not make fun of you. Like that is totally fine.
You say we won't make fun of you, but let's be honest. Tom will say something that feels a little, but it's just a little snarky. He'll say something a little snarky.
It'll be in good fun. It'll be in good jest. We are not going to be like the forum telling you to go Google it. No, we'll answer your questions.
No, seriously. Any questions? Okay.
Yes.
And also, if you don't want to use your name, have fun and give us a silly name.
Sure, that'd be fun.
At least come up with something. So this anonymous person would like us to discuss using 3 horizontal center speakers as left, center, right versus a pair of towers with a horizontal center versus 3 tower speakers. So that's 3 different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
In the short term, the plan is to put the left and right speakers on either side of a 150-inch projection screen with the center below the screen and angled upwards to aim at the audience. Good. But in the long term, the plan is to construct a false wall, which could act as a baffle wall and have an acoustically transparent screen.
Sure.
He's been told that towers will provide better imaging than using 3 horizontal center speakers, but the towers he's considering are also rear ported, while the center speaker he's considering is front ported.
Mm-hmm.
So given his future plans, does it make sense to even consider rear ported speakers? Would he be giving up a lot in terms of imaging or some other aspect of sound quality by using 3 horizontal center speakers, or would 3 tower speakers actually be the best choice of all, and he should do whatever is necessary to make that happen?
Excellent question.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. Why would you not want your name on that? You deserve an award for such a good question, actually.
Yeah, so again, like so many things, it depends, right? This is always going to be the best answer. I will say this. If you have some sort of rear ported or passive radiator design type speaker, you would not want to insert that into a baffle wall. A baffle wall is when you have a false wall and then you fill that whole void created by the false wall with insulation. Right. The reason you might do something like that is because if you're using an in-wall or an on-wall or even just a regular cabinet speaker, but you're putting it very close to a boundary surface, like your front wall, what you're going to tend to get is boundary reinforcement, right? The sound waves that come out the speaker also go back the other direction, right? The air is moving back and forth. Yes. So if you're very close to the wall that's right by that speaker, you're going to get this boundary reinforcement where the sound waves come back towards the speaker, they bounce off that wall, come back out and sort of multiply or interfere with the sound waves coming directly out of the speaker. So by putting a whole bunch of absorption there, you sort of nullify that. You get rid of that bounce coming off the boundary. That's why you either normally have the speakers a fair distance away from the front wall. We try to do that 2 or 3 feet from the front wall, or you sort of put insulation on that front wall, create a baffle wall out of it. You wouldn't want to do that with a rear ported speaker or with a passive radiator speaker, because then you're blocking the airflow in and out of that port or blocking those passive radiators. A sealed speaker or a front ported speaker doesn't have that problem.
Right.
So logistically, I have to say, the front ported speaker in this case makes a heck of a lot more sense. Because even if you could always, of course, just construct the false wall, put your acoustically transparent screen on top of that, and not fill it with insulation. You could do that. Now, of course, you could use a ported speaker, but if you do that, then you still want the distance from the front wall, ideally. You'd still want the 2 or 3 feet from the front wall. Now, maybe you have the space to do that. Maybe your false wall is 4 feet in front of the physical wall. No reason to fill it with insulation. You can have the speakers well away from the wall, and that's okay. But normally, when people are constructing a false wall, it's pretty close to the physical front wall.
So am I reading this right? What he's wanting to do is make a fake wall such that it looks like there is just a wall with a screen on it.
That's right.
And his speakers would be behind the screen in this new sort of pseudo closet.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you could do this with a drop-down screen as well, right? You just have the speaker standing there, and then the screen drops down in front of it. He's going to do it with a fixed frame screen, so you need some sort of structure to hold that.
Right.
So you construct this false wall, and then you have the option of, if that false wall is going to be physically close to the physical front wall, well, you can stuff it full of insulation and nullify that boundary effect. Or you could just take up a lot of the square footage in your room and build it far away from the front wall. But like I say, most people, when they make the false wall, they put it pretty close to the front wall.
But he's talking about putting the speakers inside this new space he's
Yeah,
making.
yeah. So
definitely you don't want it rear ported, or it's
No.
just going into the empty space.
But like I say, it depends. Maybe he's got 4 extra feet to spare. That's where he's going to build a false wall, in which case, by all means, go ahead with the reported speaker. So that's why I have to say it depends. But if the idea is that the false wall is going to be fairly close to the physical front wall, it would be a good idea to make it a baffle wall, fill it full of insulation, in which case you don't want the rear ported speaker. So those are all the caveats there. Now, as far as the whole imaging thing goes, when you have a horizontal center speaker, there is no question that when you get to the high frequencies, now they have this wide baffle. That wide baffle exceeds the dimensions of the sound waves coming out, which means you get some baffle effect. You get some boundary effect just
Like
off the
we
front.
mentioned before.
Yeah, just off the front surface of the speaker, as the case may be. And then as it gets to the edges of that baffle, you get these little eddies of sound that spin off. And you can ameliorate that by rounding the edges of the speaker or chamfering them or something like that. But you get sort of little eddies that come off the edges of the speaker. So in general, a physically wider front baffle will mean slightly narrower dispersion. And when we're talking about narrow versus wide dispersion, it's not as though you go way off to the side of a horizontal center speaker and you don't hear anything.
Right.
That's not what we're talking.
It's not a beam.
What we're talking about is how far can you go to the left or right of dead ahead center and have the sound be the same as when you're dead ahead center. Right? There's sort of this window, this cone of sound, where the sound is uniform as long as you're within that range. And then when you go outside of that range, it's not as though you hear nothing, but the sound changes slightly. You get a slightly different timbre. So, for example, with the speakers I have, the Ascend acoustic speakers that I have ones that are basically like the towers. You know, they're about 7.5 inches wide from left to right. And then I have the center speaker, which is like over 2 feet wide, right? And I've done the test where I start with myself on axis and then I move slowly to the left and the right. And with the narrow speakers, I can get like past 45 degrees to the left or the right before the timbre starts to change. They're really wide dispersion. You know, there's like a 90-degree cone where you can be anywhere in there and the sound is basically the same. Now, on the horizontal center, that's reduced down to maybe about a 55-degree cone. You know, maybe not quite 30 degrees to the left or right of center. All the same components. All that changed was how wide the front baffle is. So when people are talking about imaging capability, if you have a large audience area, then you sort of want the widest cone that you can so that every seat is getting kind of uniform sound. That's sort of the goal. And it also means your speakers can be farther apart. They don't have to be towed in as much, and you'll still be within this uniform cone of sound. But it's not as though, 30 degrees to the left and right of center is so narrow that it can't work. It might just mean that you have to pull them in a little bit more. That's all.
Okay.
So really, I don't see using horizontal center speakers as a big challenge unless you have a really wide seating area and you super duper care about the outside seats, which, I mean, most people, they care about the middle seats, the ones they're going to sit in, and then the other audience members, maybe it's, slightly compromised.
It just sort of instinctively feels weird to use 3 horizontal center speakers.
It's not super common, but you go to professional mixing studios or professional dubbing stages, and that's often what they're using.
Yeah, 3 that are the same. Yeah.
Or 3 just big squares, right? A lot of studio monitors are just big squares. So, just because it's uncommon visually, it doesn't mean this can't work. Now, there's an objective difference in the dispersion most often. So, I can't tell you that there's never a reason to opt for the narrower tower versus the wider horizontal speaker. But in this case, I really don't think it's going to be a problem. And because of the logistics of wanting the false wall and everything, I would say go for the 3 horizontal centers.
Sure. And plus, it doesn't matter how it looks if he builds a acoustically transparent screen and speakers are behind. Who cares?
The other thing you can do is take a horizontal center and turn it 90 degrees.
You sure can.
And if it has a tweeter that's got a waveguide on it or something, you unscrew it and you rotate the tweeter 90 degrees as well, and all of a sudden you have a vertical speaker with a narrow baffle. So
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, that is always an option.
So you just turn it. Yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that answered Anonymous's question, and that was a very good question. So no one wimp out when it comes to giving your name. We love you all. Nathan D gave his name, and there he is as Nathan D. He's considering Ascend Acoustics Sierra speakers.
Wonder where he got that idea.
Can't imagine. He's leaning toward the piano black finish, but he plans to one day have his speakers again behind an acoustically transparent screen. Boy, that's a theme tonight.
It sure is, and not a bad one. I'm all in favor.
Right, me too. I'd love that. Will the piano gloss finish reflect too much light back through an acoustically transparent screen? Again, we're touching on that topic. So he's asking that. Ascend also offers high gloss black, satin black, and matte black. So which would be the best choice, keeping in mind that his speakers will be visible for the time being, and he'd like them to look pretty.
Which is all fair enough.
I know, no kidding. Yeah. Gee, I don't know. I mean, the speakers in my living room are, I would say they're probably satin black.
Yep, that could be.
If I had to just like knowing what I know about paint, there's like a matte and a satin and a flat and a
so there's a little bit of a sheen to it, but you wouldn't call it like glossy. Right.
No, it's by no means is it shiny, glossy piano.
Yeah.
That's such a matter of taste.
It really kind of is.
If you're interested in the piano gloss finish, if you just think it looks really pretty, you're not going to be happy with a matte finish.
Probably not. No. And I got the matte finish because I was thinking ahead. I'm like, I want no reflection at all, if I can get it, because I'm hoping to build a dedicated theater one day with an acoustically transparent screen. I'm like, I'm going to go for the matte black. I got to tell you, I'm pretty darn familiar with the Ascend speakers. The satin black bamboo finish, the pictures on the website do not do it justice. Right. It looks really nice because it's real bamboo. Those cabinets are real bamboo, and it's so nice to be able to see the grain of that wood visually. And the matte black doesn't let you do it, and actually neither does the piano black, because both of them completely cover the grain of the wood itself.
Right, okay.
So my favorite actually is the satin black bamboo.
There you go.
Of course, it's got a little bit, it looks really pretty, and believe me, it looks prettier than the pictures show it on the website. Now, when you put it behind an acoustically transparent screen, now, Gary already told us about this. There can be a difference. If they're going to be right behind the screen, and what he's worried about is, there are the little holes in the acoustically transparent screen. Some of the light goes through. It's going to reflect off of whatever's behind there and then come back the other way. Most acoustically transparent screens, you can get a black backing as well. Now, the black backing is also acoustically transparent, so it also has holes. But we're talking about another layer that the light has to get through. And so, in other words, what actually makes it through the screen to get to the speakers that are behind the screen in the first place is very little light, and then it has to reflect off that and come back the other way. So I don't really think a glossy speaker is a huge problem behind an acoustically transparent screen if that screen has a black backing layer.
Okay.
If it doesn't, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But most of all, I think if you go for the satin black bamboo, they'll look really nice right now. And yes, there's a little bit of a sheen to it, but it's nowhere near as reflective as the piano black.
It is truly a style question, though, as to what you think looks prettier. Because some folks, I mean, that glossiness looks, it's sort of a classic look of elegance, right? It looks... Sure. It looks completely
different. It also shows
different.
Fingerprints and dust like nobody's business.
Right. You better not have kids with grubby little hands anywhere near them.
No, I say go for the satin black bamboo.
I would too.
I think it's the best of all worlds.
There you go. And as much as I admonished our previous anonymous questioner, here comes another anonymous question. That's right. It's a different person who was also...
This fellow had a good reason. So I'm respecting that. But again, really good question. So I want to bring it onto the podcast somehow for all of our listeners. But we just won't mention this person's name or the situation.
All right. From our witness protection listener, will an optical HDMI cable such as those offered by Monoprice, there's the link we will include, or Amazon, will those optical HDMI cables electrically isolate a display from an AV receiver or source device so that surges or lightning strikes won't be able to fry both devices? Interesting. My guess is if it's plastic and strung glass, the electricity can't go down that.
if it is.
If it is. If it is. That's what I said.
Yes. So moving on a little bit more there, if you want to hit the next part, because this comes up.
All right. The less expensive options are pretty clearly unidirectional. So what HDMI features are lost as a result, and will the HDMI handshake process still work? And further, there are bidirectional optical HDMI cables, but they're more expensive, and they require a power source at the display end since there's no way to draw power to power the return signal laser connected to the input of the TV.
Right. So
Wow.
you have to remember what's happening here is you've got an HDMI source, your Blu-ray player, let's say.
Right.
You're plugging in an optical HDMI cable. Now, inside of the plug, there has to be a little LED laser.
Yeah, something has to make the light.
Yeah, something has to translate the electrical HDMI signal into little pulses of light.
Right.
And then that's sent down a plastic or glass little fiber tube. It reaches the other end where there's a receiving, basically, you can think of it as a little camera, but it's a little optical sensor there, which then goes through a little processor that turns it back into an electrical signal that connects to your television so that your television can understand the electrical signal again. But we all know that HDMI has these stupid handshake things and control protocols and all that type of stuff. Now, I have to thank the person who sent this question because I wasn't actually sure. I'm looking at these unidirectional optical HDMI cables, which only have a little LED laser on one end, not on both ends. They only got it on one end, which means they can only send the pulses of light in one direction. So they can send the video and audio that away towards your display, but there's no way to send a signal back.
I gotcha.
Now, most of us had the experience if you plug in an HDMI cable from a source to a display, and sometimes it says, no display detected, or, display does not support copy protection, so I can't show you an image, right? How does it know that? There has to be a return signal.
Right,
So the person who sent in this question, he actually wrote to the people who make the optical HDMI cables that are sold on Amazon, and those are unidirectional. It has one end that's clearly marked source, another end that's clearly marked receiver, right? They have to go in that direction. There's only an LED laser on one side, not both. He wrote to them, they wrote back and they said, oh yeah, there actually are copper wires. They're not carrying the video and audio signal, but they're there to do the handshake process.
Okay.
Which
well,
means you're not electrically isolating the two sides anymore because you got copper going between the two of them.
Yeah, well, so it's not, yeah.
So you have to go for the bidirectional ones. You have to go for the ones that have a little LED laser on both ends, can send a light signal both ways, and then, of course, you don't need copper because you can send a signal both ways. But you can draw power from the source device, the HDMI output, that has some electrical power, enough to power the little LED.
Right.
But the display side doesn't send out power from its input. Right.
So
you have to have a little power. So yeah, they have all of these ones. There's ones from Cables to Go, and there's another one from My Cable Mart that are bidirectional. And on the receiving end, on the end you would plug into your TV, it has a little USB power cord.
USB cord, okay.
And that just
to
all
power
that's,
the laser.
It's just powering the little LED laser to send the signal back the other way.
So basically,
those will work.
it's not so much an optical HDMI cable as it is a fiber optic cable with converters on both ends.
That's exactly it. And in the case of the Cables to Go, it really is because they sell it piecemeal. They sell you the fiber cable in the middle, which has proprietary connections on either end, and then you can plug it into a little pigtail or into a wall plate, because that's Cables to Go whole thing. So you can have a wall plate. So the wall plate or the little pigtail actually has the little LED laser built into it. What they're selling in between, which can be whatever length you want, is just fiber optic cable. That's all.
So the purpose of this is to go great distances with an HDMI signal.
That's right, which is great. I mean, this is the alternative to sending it over Ethernet, right?
It just happens to be the case that it might electrically isolate.
That's right. But only if you get the bidirectional ones, because the other ones have to have some copper in there so that the handshake works.
Right.
But I learned that from the person who sent this question. So please acknowledge that it wasn't my own knowledge to bring in that there.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So our second anonymous person should be proud of that question we have educated Rob and me. I didn't even know about that.
That's really good to know. I'm really glad I know that now.
That's good. Okay, so we're moving on to Jonathan F.
And I'll say the same thing as last time. Lee, you tell us when we're done, because I'll go however long you're able to.
Okay, I can go for another, say, about 15 minutes or so. So we should be able to get.
Let's do what we can do.
All right, Jonathan F's got a lot going on here. Says,
Yeah.
we can't stop him from reading forums. He's putting his foot down. I'm going to read them anyway, even though they're full of crap. Can't stop him from reading forums. And he's glad he keeps reading them because that led him to find out about the Neura headphones, which are Australia's most successful Kickstarter campaign, having raised over 1.8 million US dollars.
Yeah.
Interesting. The Neura headphones promise to measure your unique hearing and compensate through an automated process. Wow. So it's like Odyssey for the inside of your ear holes. Test tones are played, and it actually measures the back wave generated by your eardrum to calibrate the headphones. The headphones themselves are an interesting hybrid design with an over-ear section handling the bass and an in-ear section handling the mid-range and treble. Very interesting. You can pre-order them on Indiegogo for $299. Retail is going to be $399, and they expect to ship in May of next year, May 2017.
Right. So before we get to the next part, any thoughts on those to begin with?
I'm curious. I must admit, because I like the idea of measuring what my head does, what my ears do, what my eardrums do and don't do. So it's a little bit like getting a hearing aid. It's a lot like getting a hearing aid.
Which brings us exactly to Jonathan's next point.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, okay, yeah, let's just read his next point. Because to me, the first thing I think of is like, wow, you're selling people a kit to make your own hearing aid. And I'm also wondering, how does the bass get through if you're plugging your ear hole with a mid-range treble driver?
Yeah, I know.
I don't know, because it's got to go down the same hole. My eardrum's down there. You can't all go through my skull. Okay, so here comes all of that interesting stuff aside. Jonathan was actually more interested in one particular forum response that points out why auto-correcting headphones like the Neura are unnecessary, undesirable, and coming from a flawed line of thinking. And I bet I can guess what that flawed line of thinking is, because my flawed ears are used to hearing everything in the world in the flawed way. If you correct for it, I don't know what to do with that. So get it all right up until the point it hits my head, and that's the best I can do. Anyway, AVS forum member Jaddy, like it matters who says this, points out that we can start by roughly dividing the populace into two groups, those with impaired hearing and those with non-impaired hearing. Does anyone have perfect non-impaired hearing? I don't know
if there's such a thing.
Yeah, I know everybody's going to be slightly different. If the target demographic for self-correcting headphones is the impaired hearing group, then okay, these are a new type of hearing aid. Ta-da!
Right.
But such an invention would be classified as a medical device and wouldn't be sold directly to consumers. So we have to assume the target demographic is the non-impaired hearing group. Well, I don't know that we have to assume that. And the Neura are claiming to self-correct or person-to-person variations in hearing, but what's their target response? While each person's hearing system and brain might respond slightly differently, our brains have adapted to our unique hearing system, like I was saying. If you send the exact same sound wave pattern to a bunch of different people, each person's hearing system might respond slightly differently, but we will all agree that we heard the same sound source.
Right.
And we'll never know that it sounded differently in your head. It's like the old question, does blue look the same to you as it does to me?
That's right.
I think you can say yes on that one, but it's a different thing with hearing. Okay, so attempting to target the same backwave response from every person's eardrum is critically flawed thinking, and I agree with you. If we adjust the original source sound so that every person's backwave response is the same, that means every person is hearing a different source sound.
Yeah.
If that happened in real life, everything would sound very strange indeed. And all of our brains would need to adapt over time to get used to the new normal. I think he is exactly right.
That really is exactly right, because like if you go to a concert, we're all listening to the same musicians play. We're all listening to the same orchestra play or whatever. Now, I have no idea. Your hearing might be slightly different from mine. But what wouldn't make sense is that each of us listens to a different orchestra.
Right.
So that the back wave generated by each of our eardrums is the same, as opposed to the same sound going into our eardrums to begin with.
Right.
Right? It makes sense that we want the same sound going into our eardrums, unless we have a known hearing impairment.
Right. Now, if you do have some hearing loss, but you haven't thought that it raised to the level of going to get a hearing aid, this might have an interesting effect for you. However, it's going to make everything else sound wrong.
It's gonna everything is gonna sound weird.
Yeah.
Because you have been listening to the world for however
Yes.
long you've been alive. Your brain has adapted to the, I mean,
Yes,
our hearing
and-
does change gradually over time, but our brain
Yes.
adapts gradually over time. Now, what we're doing is we're saying, well, here is some target backwave response that we've said this is what good hearing ought to look like in terms of what the eardrum does coming back the other way as it responds to the sounds going in. We're going to make everybody have the same backwave response. Everything's going to sound weird to everybody unless your hearing already perfectly matches the target response. Yeah, this really does seem like flawed thinking. I mean, when people first get hearing aids, they always say everything sounds weird, right?
Right.
Because
I
their
would
brain's
think
not
so.
used to it. So
So it would be like if you only ever saw 3D when you put on glasses to look at your television, or you only ever saw the color blue when you put on glasses.
Well, they even talk about that, right? People have done that experiment where they put on those glasses that inverts everything.
Yeah.
Right. And over time, if you wear them long enough, your brain adapts, and then you take the glasses off and everything looks weird again.
Right.
Because your brain adapts. So yeah, if the only thing you're listening to is your music through these particular headphones and they're changing the sound that goes into your ears, then as soon as you take them off, you know, like you're going to wear them long enough for your brain to adapt. In which case, now when you take them off, everything sounds weird. Or what is far more likely is you're listening to the world as normal. You put on these headphones, and now all the instruments and voices sound
What's
off.
interesting about hearing, I read an article recently where it isn't just as simple as you lose some frequencies, like your response curve gets different. That is true. But also your ability to discern details within the sound. Like your ear might say, boom, I just heard a high-pitched noise. But as time goes on, you get worse at figuring out what those high-pitched noises are.
Sure. Yeah.
So you hear something,
You're
but
right.
you can't tell what it is.
Yep.
So actually, your brain is trying to compensate for that throughout your lifetime as you get older.
Sure is.
And all that's happening too. And now you're going to go stick a thing in your ear and try to correct everything you're hearing over just your headphones.
Yeah.
And so
I don't
are you going to be
know.
disappointed with every other sound in your life?
Yeah.
You know, you're going to take the headphones off and go, well, crap.
To give them some credit, if what they've managed to do is create a target response that actually works really well, then for, you know, this is probably going to be most targeted at people who are a little bit older and have just some natural high frequency hearing loss, and maybe it will give you back some of that detail that you've lost over time. So I'm not completely throwing this out.
No, it's not crazy. It's just you need to know that this is a hearing aid.
Yeah. If you think of it in those terms,
which is fine. It may be pretty exciting to you if you may not have noticed how dull everything's gotten in your head.
Yeah. But
because
at the
that's how
same
your
time,
brain
if they're
works.
able to sell these things for $299 or even $399, I don't think it's that sophisticated.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
So I definitely have reservations on it. It's not something I would wholeheartedly recommend, but I'm not going to completely dismiss them.
Right.
Because
I would be very curious to hear it. I'll say that.
Sure.
I don't know what it would sound like, but just keep in mind what they're. I think Jonathan's thinking is correct.
That's right.
Coming up to another one here. Will T asked a question on Facebook. Will has heard us mention that he should level match his subwoofers prior to running his auto setup program in his AV receiver. But how is level matching done? Does he need a measurement microphone and software? Can he do it by ear? What's the step-by-step process there of level matching subwoofers before?
So you're going to want some kind of meter. I wouldn't suggest doing this by ear. We don't hear bass terribly well. Our ability to match volumes just by ear is pretty poor, so you'll want some kind of meter. Now, you don't have to go to the expense of a $100 microphone and Room EQ Wizard. You can do this with an SPL meter. You can certainly purchase inexpensive SPL meters from Parts Express or Amazon, or you could download an SPL meter app for your phone. And for this purpose, fine. It's really not a problem.
Are there any SPL meter apps that already know, like, for instance, what my phone's microphone's response is?
I am not sure, because that's going to apply more to Android, because at least with iPhones, there's a limited number of models.
Right. Yeah.
But ultimately, in this case, it doesn't even have to be super accurate, because all you're going for is the same reading on both. It doesn't necessarily have to be the right reading.
There you go. Yeah,
It
okay.
just has to be the same.
The same, right. It could be the same wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So get yourself an SPL meter app, or get yourself an inexpensive SPL meter from Parts Express or Amazon. I'd say that's well enough. What you'll want to do, turn your master volume dial all the way up to 0 dB before you start.
Which is scary. That's scary. Make sure nothing's
Feels a little scary, but yeah, nothing's playing. You just turn it all the way up there. Go into your manual speaker setups. And in there, you'll have the option to change the output level for each of your speakers. Among them will be your subwoofer. Now, if you only have a single subwoofer output, or if you have two subwoofer plugs, but they both get the same signal, so there's only one subwoofer trim level available inside the user menu, then just only have one subwoofer physically connected for the start. And then after you do the first one, you'll disconnect it and connect the second one.
Make the other one run through it again.
Yep, but what you're going to do, you're going to set that trim level to 0, because you just want it at the default. You just set it to 0. Start the test tone playing. One subwoofer is going to make some sound. You are going to go to your seat. You're going to hold your SPL meter or your phone with the microphone pointed straight up at the ceiling.
Straight up at the ceiling. Okay.
You're not going to aim it anywhere. It's going to point it straight up at the ceiling. And you're going to look at the reading. And you can have a friend go to the back of the subwoofer and adjust it until the reading is 75 dB. Or if you're not super confident in your SPL meter or your SPL meter app, maybe it doesn't matter that much, but you're going to go for something about 75 dB.
Sure.
Going to be somewhere there. Then you're going to physically disconnect that first subwoofer, physically connect the other one, do it again. And you're going to make it say 75 dB by adjusting the volume dial on the back of the second subwoofer.
Would it be better to affix your microphone or SPL meter to something?
To a tripod, to a camera stand, something like that if you could. But honestly, this isn't like super duper critical.
Okay.
And you're talking about
at these frequencies for bass.
You're talking about bass frequencies where they're wrapping around you anyway. Don't have the microphone like on the back of your chair, right?
Right.
Give it some free space, like we always talk about, some free space all around that microphone.
Right. Don't cradle it like a kitten.
That's
Hold it out in front of you.
But it's not super duper critical, and all we're going for is the same reading. So, if one of your subwoofers is way closer than the other one, you're going to notice that, if you had both of their volume dials at the same point, one of them reads louder on your SPL meter than the other. All you want them is to have the same reading. That's it. Okay, and once you've done that, you go ahead, run the auto EQ, and you're good to go.
All right. That doesn't sound too hard.
No, but you do need a little something that isn't just your ears. That would help. Now, if you want to do the longer process, if you have an auto setup program like YPow or Odyssey or something like that, and it's not the sub EQ HT version of Odyssey that does this for you automatically, if you're willing to, what you could do is just only connect your front, left, and right and one subwoofer and run the auto setup. And then look at the setting and it'll say, okay, with this one subwoofer connected, I had to boost it up 3 dB or something like that, right? So maybe you turn the volume dial just a little bit up on that one and then disconnect that first sub, run it again with just your front, left, and right and the second subwoofer connected and see what the auto setup tells you. Maybe this one, it says, I had to turn this one to down 6 dB. So you turn down the volume dial a little bit and then you connect both subwoofers and run it again. Because
just kind of keep going back and forth till you get them pretty close.
Going, yeah. So if that's the more time intensive, if you don't want to purchase an SPL meter or an SPL meter app, you can do the more time intensive version by just the mic that came with.
All right. That actually makes sense.
Sure.
That's not too bad. Okay. I think I can get through Mike's question.
Let's do it. That was pretty darn good.
Okay. We'll get through Mike and we'll have a couple left over for next week. Mike, he likes bass a lot. Amen, brother. He tried because, hey, that's what life's all about, He tried the RHA MA750 in-ear monitors to try to get even more bass than the Shure SE215 IEMs. But he says one of his ears always presents a challenge for getting a good seal, and earphones frequently come loose and fall out of that ear. He wound up ordering a pair of the Shure SE215 limited edition IEMs that promise even stronger bass over the regular SE215s. He found that by bending the moldable wire that attaches to the earpiece a certain way, he's able to get them to stay put in his problem ear. Yeah. So it makes me wonder, is that problem ear small, big, shaped funny? Interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, but, some of us have a slightly different shape to the inner part of your ear.
Oh, we're also messy and uneven.
That's right.
We're all just flawed humans. It's okay. On top of these bass-heavy earphones, he uses the Power Amp Android app, which allows him to boost the bass even further.
He likes bass.
Blow my head apart. He's found that an external headphone amp really helps in his case. Yeah, I bet. And he was hearing audible distortion using just his phone's headphone jack. Now here come the questions. Now he's wondering about the more expensive Shure in-ear models. How do the SE215 compare to the SE535 or the SE530 that Rob owns? Obviously, particularly when it comes to bass.
So, funnily enough, the SE215s are actually the most bass-heavy version that Shure makes. The
All right.
other models, they aim for a more neutral response. They aim for it not having so much tipped up bass. Now the 425s, so it kind of goes tick-tock. So you got the 115s, which are fairly neutral, but a little bit frequency range limited because they only have one driver, so they don't get the really high treble or the really deep bass. The 215s that boost the bass. The 315s that are pretty darn neutral. The 425s that boost the bass a little, although I wouldn't say even as much as the 215s. And then the 535s, which are like super duper neutral. So funnily enough, if what you like most is bass, you actually have the best ones in the 215s and the limited edition ones that boosted even more. If what you want is louder and louder bass, unless you're going to EQ the heck out of the more expensive ones, you actually already have the most bass heavy.
All right. There you go. Good deal. I feel like I want to start a Kickstarter for Mike and build him like a skull subwoofer. Like it would be headphones that had a big driver on the back of your head. You just kind of tighten it around your forehead. And
well, maybe he needs that subwoofer backpack that they have.
Yeah, something like that. I just feel like if you could just like fire some bass frequencies directly into his cranium, he would be like thrilled. I know the feeling. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's right.
What about the $1,000 SE846? He finds their 4-driver design with a dedicated subwoofer drool worthy.
Yeah.
Okay, I can imagine. That's like I just said, I want to put like a 8-inch driver on the back of his head. At least from the looks of them, he thinks they're drool worthy. So he's never heard them.
So I've heard these over at the headphone bar that we have.
Oh, okay.
I don't really like them.
Really?
I think the 535s sound better.
Really? So what was it about the $1,000 SE846s you didn't like?
They just sound more uneven. They don't sound as neutral. I mean, I like a really neutral sound.
I do too.
The bass is stronger, but again, the 215s are actually still the most tipped up out of any of them.
Okay.
I just thought they sounded more uneven than the 535s. The 535s sound as smooth as can be. They just sound really, really neutral. So it's really tough for me to say that they'd be worth $1,000 because they don't give you as much bass as the 215s, and they don't sound
sound weird
better. So yeah, it's I wouldn't really recommend them. It's strange.
Sometimes more isn't better.
I know. Yeah.
He's got another question. The price keeps going up. What about Shure's $3,000 electrostatic KSE 1500 system? They come with a matched DAC/amp to power the electrostatic earphones and provide DSP and EQ.
I haven't heard them. I don't know. I would suspect. Now they have to have this separate amp. It's not even so much to like power the earphones as we think of earphones. It's to charge the electrostatic stators, right?
Yeah.
Because the way an electrostatic speaker works is it has these two electrical stators on either side that have a static charge, and that's what the little membrane reacts to instead of a magnet.
So it's not a magnet, yeah.
It's not a magnet, it's a static charge. So you have to have this really, really high voltage to charge the stators that the membrane reacts to. So that's what the amp has to. That's why you can't just attach it to any normal headphone amp or directly out of a headphone jack. You have to have Shure's own separate little piece that attaches to it. Now that separate little piece is a DAC. It does have an EQ. It has 4 presets, and then you can also do a manual EQ. So if you want to boost the bass even more, I think this has the capability. They have tremendous output capability from these electrostatic earphones, but I haven't heard them. I would suspect they have amazing capabilities.
You would think at $3,000.
$3,000.
That better come with a butler putting them in my ears for me.
Yeah,
that's $3,000.
That's a lot of money. But hey, I mean, if you have a place where you could audition them, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd absolutely audition these in a heartbeat. But I haven't heard them. I can't tell you exactly.
I bet you I'd have to drive at least 200 miles to Atlanta, Georgia, to find any place that would have.
It's like,
this.
man, you know how many SE215s and headphone amps you can buy for $3,000?
You can buy that 8-inch subwoofer and mount it to the back of your head.
That's a lot of money for earphones.
Get a custom like football helmet and just cut out the back and put a large subwoofer driver on the back of your head. I'd be curious to hear that. Can we glean anything from electrostatic speakers and their performance vis-a-vis bass?
I would imagine they have exceedingly fast transient response because the thing that is actually making the sound weighs essentially nothing. So there's like no inertia to the movement of that thing. Yeah, it's very tough to say. I don't know, but they have that separate powered thing with the manual EQ on it. So none of the other ones give you that.
That's intriguing. I mean, I'd want to put them in my ears just to see.
$3,000.
Just so I could say I put $3,000 of stuff in my ears.
That's right.
I don't think I've ever put $3,000 of stuff anywhere on me. Not even the finest tuxedo at a wedding. I'm trying to think. Maybe I've had $200 worth of things on me. Well, no, I take that back. My new phone. It was kind of expensive.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, we have, of course, Ryan T., who we will get to next week. He said it's all right. We can answer his questions next week.
Okay.
So we will do so. And then we also have, let's see, we just did Mike. So we got Brandon M. and Glenn S. Right. And we do have a couple other questions that, of course, came in like today. So
also, I feel like we should move on because Tom always gets exasperated when he finds out it was a 2 hour and 45-minute show when he was gone.
Yeah, we also have Sam P., whose question will be on there next week. So yeah, plenty already for next week, but that's all right. We will wrap it up here. So once again, obviously we have answered some questions today, and if you enjoyed that and you would like to get your question answered, just send it to us, question@avrant.com.
And don't be shy.
Don't be shy. All questions welcome.
The questions are good.
Even if it's one we literally just answered this week and you just heard it and you're like, do that again because I didn't understand.
So yeah, exactly.
That is absolutely fine. Please CC Rob at avrant.com and Tom at avrant.com at the same time so we all get your message. You can come to avrant.com, our website. You'll see the show notes there, links to the things we talked about. And if you would like to, you can donate to help support the podcast, just like our listeners of the week did, Karpov, Sam, and Nathan D.
Thank you.
All of those guys donated to the podcast, help support us. And I'm also going to thank Paul McDonald once again. Hopefully that packaging depot comes through and actually delivers my plasma safely.
What is it, 130-pound television?
130-pound plasma. Hope it makes it there. All right. You can also reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/AV Rant Podcast, all one word. And on Twitter, I am at First Reflect. Tom is at AV Rant_Tom. And Lee, people can reach you.
I am at Lee Overtweet. And if you're watching YouTube, you can see it on my big old baseball bat here that Austin made for me. I kind of dig it. It's like, it looks violent. Like I just want to grab it and smash everything. Just smash a bunch of AV myths, you know.
There you go. And speaking of Austin, our producer, he is at Austin Pond. Austin with a TEN, not a TIN. Austin has his own podcast. They call it We Watch Movies. You'd think you know what it's about, but what's about?
It's 19th century logging.
Okay.
And the equipment used and the people involved, it's fascinating. It's a little bit like one of those Civil War documentaries.
We Watch Movies. There you go.
That's right.
So confusing. All right. Well, Lee, thank you so much once again. We didn't even mention how short notice this was for you. We joke about it, but this was something.
Every time it's short. Like I said, the shortest one was a few hours one time, but this time it would have been a little better. You gave me like a day. But I had some things to do in between, so I feel unprepared. But I think the podcast, here's the proof the podcast worked out to the right time. I am just taking the last sip of this last beer. Here we go.
Just right.
We're done.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks so much for AV Rant. I am Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now go out and listen to something.